Hey there, and welcome back to Dreamland Encounters. I share stories about experiences with beings beyond our world, hoping they'll help you relax and drift off to sleep. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from. The drive through southern Illinois that night was eerily quiet. Route 14 stretches between McLeansboro and Wayne City, lined with endless cornfields and the occasional rundown barn. Early September, the sun had just set, creating that liminal moment where the sky still glowed, but everything else fell into shadow. I was heading home late after visiting my aunt, expecting to arrive before midnight. The music played softly, windows cracked to let in the warm evening air. Crickets chirped from the roadside ditches, breaking the silence. Just past 7:30, something caught my eye. Off to the left, maybe half a mile into a field, several lights hung motionless. At first, I assumed they were from farm equipment. Those massive harvesters have lights everywhere, but these were different. 5 or 6 pale yellow-white lights hung in a shallow arc, completely still and suspended high up. They weren't like typical vehicle lights. No blinking, no movement. 2 spread out belonged to a single machine. I slowed down, trying to get a better view, but the high corn and hedges blocked my sight. There was nowhere safe to pull over, just gravel and drainage ditches. As I rounded a slight bend, trees completely obscured the field. 30 seconds later, when the view cleared, the lights had vanished. Gone. Completely. I kept checking my mirrors, half expecting them to reappear. Once, I thought I saw a faint hint of light far behind me, but it might have been just a reflection. I tried convincing myself it was a drone display or something mundane, but something didn't feel right. Hours later, I stopped at a small gas station near Yucca. After holding it for 40 miles, I desperately needed a bathroom and something to drink. One of those old, worn-out stations that seemed frozen in time. The encounter stayed with me, unexplained and lingering in my mind. I pulled into a small gas station with just 2 pumps out front and a dimly lit shop inside, fluorescent lights flickering overhead. The place looked deserted, except for a black SUV parked off to the side, engine off, windows sealed tight. Something about the vehicle seemed out of place, newer and sleeker than you'd expect in this rural spot. I went inside, used the restroom, grabbed a bottle of water and a quick snack. When I returned outside, the SUV remained exactly where it had been. I didn't pay much attention till I got into my car and started the engine, cracking the window to let some cool air in. Suddenly, a man appeared. He hadn't made a sound, just materialized out of the darkness, leaning forward and resting his hand lightly on my window frame. I jumped. He was dressed impeccably. A fitted black suit, crisp white shirt, black tie, and dark sunglasses despite the night's complete darkness. His face was blank, neither angry nor friendly. "You didn't see anything unusual on Route 14, did you?" he asked. His voice was soft yet precise, almost mechanical, with no discernible accent. His gaze seemed to pass right through me, as if examining something beyond. I stared back, then simply answered, "No." He paused, hand still on my car, studying me. Then, a single, deliberate nod. He released the window frame and walked back toward the SUV, standing beside the driver's side door, facing away. I pulled out faster than normal, my hands unexpectedly slick with sweat. Nothing about the encounter seemed overtly threatening, but something felt deeply wrong, unsettling in a way I couldn't quite name. About a mile down the road, I checked my rearview mirror. The SUV was there, 2 car lengths behind, a black shadow without headlights. For the next 15 miles, it followed me with eerie precision. I tried changing lanes, slowing down, speeding up. It mirrored every move perfectly, never getting closer or falling back. On a sudden impulse, I turned onto a smaller county road winding through farmland. Checking the mirror, I saw the SUV follow. Another random turn onto a narrow gravel lane, no streetlights, barely wide enough for 2 vehicles. Open dark fields surrounded me. When I looked back again, I killed my lights and pulled over, engine still running, and waited. The SUV was gone. 3 minutes passed, no other cars came, only the sound of insects rustling through corn stalks broke the silence. On the drive home, the SUV never reappeared, but the next morning revealed something strange. Fingerprints marked my car's driver's side window, smudges where someone had leaned in, and higher marks on the window frame as if gripped from above. A thin, straight mark ran from the roof's edge down to the door handle. Not a scratch, but an oily, iridescent residue that seemed to sink into the paint. The car wash didn't remove it. The streak remained, Days later, walking the dog before bed, I spotted a black sedan across the street, empty. Not a neighbor's car. 5 minutes later, it vanished. We were at the edge of Tyler's cornfield where woods thinned out. Late October in Iowa, warm with leaves still rustling. Grain dryers hummed in the distance. That persistent farm smell of burnt chaff and fertilizer hung in the air. 4 of us, me, Tyler, Jordan, and Miles, were just hanging out before Halloween. Tyler wanted drone footage for a horror short. About 100 yards into the field, Miles pointed out the first light. A dim, silent flashlight-like glow in the sky. It blinked twice, paused, then blinked again. Not a plane or drone. It hovered, then slowly slid sideways before stopping. I've started avoiding Route 14. Not because of the lights, because of the question. The way he asked it, like he already knew the answer. Tyler took out his phone and started filming. Suddenly, we noticed 2 more lights in the distance, lower than the first. They moved together and apart in what seemed like a deliberate pattern. Jordan made a joke about Morse code telling us to go away, but no one laughed. A strange feeling settled in my gut. Not quite fear, but a sense that we were somewhere we shouldn't be. It felt like the lights were observing us instead of the other way around. We continued watching. Tyler launched his drone to get a better view, flying it above the crop stalks. He started recording, and we all crouched down to stay out of the shot. When the drone reached about 30 feet up, the lights did something unexpected. They didn't fade or blink, but moved incredibly fast in perfect synchronization. Not vertically, but sideways. The entire sky above the field shimmered like heat waves rising from asphalt, and the lights quickly vanished into that shimmer. The drone's feed cut out immediately, going completely black. Tyler manually brought the drone down. It landed without any damage, but something was off. The battery read full, and the camera wasn't functioning. We hurried back to the house in silence, each of us hoping someone would offer a rational explanation. Nobody did. At home, Tyler connected the drone to his laptop. The footage showed only static where the lights had been, with the rest of the video appearing normal. When he checked his phone video, things got even stranger. He discovered he'd apparently recorded over a minute of the lights before launching the drone, but when he tried to view the file, it was completely gone. No thumbnail, no corrupted version. Nothing in the cloud backup either. He was certain he hadn't deleted it. Jordan experienced the same issue with his phone video. The app froze when he tried to open the clip, then rebooted with the video missing entirely. I hadn't recorded anything, but when I checked my phone, I found an unfamiliar notification about remote access, timestamped at 9:58, and I hadn't downloaded anything that day. We left shortly after, and the street was eerily quiet. Driving home with the radio low, I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, knowing how irrational I was being. Nothing happened, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd been marked somehow, watched by something we couldn't understand. The next morning at school, everything seemed normal, but nothing felt the same. Something felt off. Tyler looked exhausted, constantly checking his phone like it might vanish. Miles reported strange clicking sounds through his phone speaker overnight. Jordan experienced a bizarre Wi-Fi interruption at 3 a.m., with his connection dropping while everyone else's worked fine. Later that day, I spotted him. A man in a crisp black suit, standing by the senior lot's chain-link fence, clean-shaven, white shirt, black-tied, dark sunglasses. He wasn't speaking to anyone, just pacing slowly. Initially, I assumed he was a parent or substitute teacher, waiting to be guided in. But his gaze was fixed on the cars, not the building. A teacher who came outside seemed momentarily unsettled by his presence. As she started to approach, he simply walked away without a word, disappearing around the gym's corner. When I mentioned this to Tyler during lunch, he went silent. He then revealed that his mother had discovered a single set of boot prints in their backyard that morning, size 12 or 13 in a straight line. No other tracks, no signs of disturbed ground, just a precise path near the fence. We silently agreed to drop the discussion at school. The videos had vanished. The drone footage was useless. We had nothing concrete. Yet strange occurrences continued. Jordan's email account locked him out, supposedly accessed from Virginia. Miles's car alarm triggered precisely at 2:17 a.m. for 3 consecutive nights. Tyler stopped bringing his laptop, claiming it wouldn't charge even when plugged in. One afternoon, I returned home to find my bedroom window open, which I distinctly remembered locking that morning. Nothing seemed disturbed, but my phone sat inexplicably on the windowsill instead of its charger. About a week later, I saw him again. Walking to my car after practice around 5:30, with the sun already down, I cut across the grass near the side lot. There he stood under the bleachers, half hidden in shadow, motionless. No phone, no expression, just standing with hands clasped, seemingly waiting. I didn't stop. I didn't even look. I got in my car and left. 2 months after our encounter with those mysterious lights, Tyler moved to Missouri. His mom claimed it was for her job, but something felt off. He disappeared from our group chat without a proper goodbye, leaving us with unanswered questions. The drone still sits in a shoebox under Miles's bed. We haven't touched it since that night in August. It was just after sunset, and the air hung heavy and sticky, typical of Western Oregon's late summer evenings. My home sits on the edge of a small valley, surrounded by forest and a few weathered radio towers perched on the ridge above. A friend had told me about Hilltop 6, a perfect spot for long-range videography with a clear 360-degree view, free from power lines and cell towers. Around 7:15 p.m., I packed the drone into its case and drove up the narrow gravel road to an old logging trail. I set up on a flat dirt patch about 200 yards below the towers, completely alone. The only sounds were cicadas buzzing and distant highway traffic. I completed my pre-flight checklist. Props locked, battery full, GPS engaged. The drone rose to 150 feet, hovering steadily. Through my tablet, the live feed showed crisp golden light fading to blue Douglas firs outlined sharply against the sky. After capturing smooth pan shots, I decided to climb higher to 300 feet and tilt the camera down toward the road. When I tapped the joystick, the feed stuttered momentarily before freezing into a gray, pixelated mess. I hit the emergency hover button, but nothing changed. Tablet in hand, I sprinted up the trail, watching the signal strength meter blink red. At the ridge's base, I paused and pointed the tablet toward the drone's last known location. Suddenly the live image returned, revealing the ground falling away and something dark and sleek streaking beneath the drone. Rewinding the feed in slow motion, I saw a long, slender shape smooth as oil slicing past the lens at incredible speed. No wings, no rotors, just a dark blur like a shark cutting through water. The drone was skittering through the air, its video feed slightly glitching. In the frames that remained, I caught a glimpse of something strange. Pure, impossible motion. No shadow, no downdraft, nothing. I'd logged hundreds of flights but never seen anything like this. I set the drone to return home, watching it trace back along its GPS route. The wind was light, with no explanation for any random gust. No birds that big existed out here. As the drone touched down and locked its motors, I realized I'd forgotten to disengage the geofence before packing up. Just then, my phone buzzed. A blocked number. No caller ID, completely untraceable. Probably a telemarketer glitch, I thought. In the car, I played the voicemail. Quiet breathing, then a smooth, low male voice. "We need you to stop flying near Hilltop 6. You've seen enough." A click, static, then silence. Sitting under a busted streetlight, I scrolled through my recent calls. Nothing. No message on my service provider, no mention in the call log. The voicemail interface showed it as new, but pressing buttons only returned an error. Message unavailable. I drove home in silence, empty roads stretching before me. Glancing repeatedly in the rearview mirror, I half expected headlights, but saw nothing. At home, I plugged the drone controller into my laptop to download the footage. Everything from the first flight was intact. The panning ridge, sunset glow, then those glitch frames. A dark streak smeared across the video like ink, appearing only briefly. I exported the clip to a separate folder and shut down the software. Sleep was elusive. That flat command about Hilltop 6 echoed in my mind, spoken as if I'd already agreed to obey. At 2 a.m., grabbing water, I noticed my phone screen glowing. No new notifications, but the voicemail icon blinked again. Tapping it produced only a spinning load that suddenly stopped. The next morning, I researched airspace restrictions around Hilltop 6. FAA charts showed only Class G airspace, totally uncontrolled. No military zones, no restricted altitudes. I pulled off the dirt road onto the gravel lot beside Mirror Lake just after 10 that Friday night. The moon was almost full, bright enough to light the pines, but dim against the low fog rolling in off the water. I'd spent weeks searching online forums and posts from other drone pilots, finding nothing about weird objects or clandestine warnings. That night, I was determined to get a clean shot of the ridge. I parked at my usual spot at 7 p.m., set up the drone, and climbed the trail again. Adjusting the camera to face west toward the sunset, I leveled it out straight. Running the drone up to 200 feet, then 250, the feed remained stable. No glitches, no lag. I hovered for a minute, watching the hillside lighten in the last rays, At exactly 7:23, everything changed. The feed flickered to grey static. As a reflex, I throttled up and caught a glimpse of the same dark blur beneath the drone. Only faster this time. Just 2 frames of shape before the feed cut out entirely. My controller buzzed with a signal loss alert. I hit RTH and scanned the sky with my own eyes. No blinking lights, no contrails, just an empty slope of pine trees tinted orange by the sunset. When the drone landed, I peeled off my goggles and stared at the ridge, half expecting someone to step out of the trees. Nothing. No vague movements, no footprints in the dirt around my launch pad. I packed up quickly, heart hammering. During the drive home, my phone rang twice. Private number, I didn't answer. When I finally listened to the voicemail, a calm, quiet, distant voice said, "We told you to stop. This is your final warning." My hands shook as I deleted phone files. I unplugged the drone controller. I erased the video from the laptop. I even tore up the printed FAA map. The next morning, I sold the drone and controller on Craigslist for half price, listing it as faulty. I shipped it to a random PO box in Nevada, telling the buyer about video issues. Now, I still think about Hilltop 6 sometimes, about that silent shape zipping through my live feed, about the men in black who didn't show up in any call logs. But I don't go back. I don't fly drones anymore. And every now and then, late at night, I swear I can hear a soft hum in the breeze, like a rotor far overhead, except there's nothing but stars. 2 hours from Salt Creek, I'd driven out to witness what meteorologists were calling anomalous light displays. As an amateur videographer, I came prepared with my DSLR on a tripod and a smartphone for backup. The lake stretched out before me, smooth as polished mercury, with rocks jutting through its glassy surface. I set up about 20 feet from the shoreline and hit record. The night was quiet except for wind rustling through cedar trees and occasional duck splashes. Around 10:17, a subtle movement caught my eye. A thin, pale blue line of light appeared on the far side of the lake, just above the tree line. It curved upward in a short semicircle before disappearing behind the trees. Quickly, I switched my phone to video mode and panned across the landscape. My DSLR continued its steady 30 FPS recording. Over the next 5 minutes, lights began emerging along the ridge. They were pale white, sometimes tinged with green or amber, always moving silently. Their patterns were erratic, loops, zigzags, tiny spirals that resembled a child playing with a laser pointer. 2 lights performed an intricate dance at one point, mirroring each other's movements, crossing paths and then reversing direction. Excitement surged through me. I focused on my DSLR, tracking a bright orb gliding smoothly above the pine trees. These weren't strobe lights or a blinking sequence, but fluid motions that looked like someone drawing with pure light. After 10 minutes, the lights gradually faded. The lake returned to its black, glass-like state. I stopped both camera recordings and quickly reviewed the phone clip. Only tree shapes and wavering orbs were visible. Satisfied, I'd packed away my phone but left the DSLR recording a bit longer to capture any water reflections. When I finally shut off the camera around 10:35, I walked to my cooler and grabbed my phone. Suddenly, the hair on my arm stood up. In the small preview window, I noticed a flicker of movement behind me. A dark shape had stepped 2 feet to my right, casting a slight shadow on the cooler. Initially, I thought it might be a swaying branch, but when I tapped to play the full-screen view, I froze. The camera caught a figure just outside its soft focus, standing by the lake. I hadn't heard a thing, no footsteps, no movement behind me. Carefully, I scrubbed through the video frame by frame. The man appeared for a fleeting moment, exactly 17 frames, barely a second, before vanishing completely. His posture was rigid, as if he'd walked up, turned toward me, and then stepped back out of sight. When I zoomed in, the image remained frustratingly blurry. Just a dark oval under what seemed to be a fedora, with no discernible features. No glint of glasses or metal. My stomach knotted. I glanced over my shoulder into the moonlit landscape. Nothing but pine trees and fog. My cooler swayed gently in the breeze. I leaned closer, sniffing the air, hearing only wind and water. I tried to rationalize, maybe a park ranger checking the area, perhaps someone out for a late-night walk. But something about the suit, about how he appeared in the video, didn't feel right. The drive home was silent, empty roads reflecting my headlights through the mist. Back in my apartment, I loaded the DSLR footage onto my computer. The lights were clear and steady, but no figure was visible. Just my camera swinging to catch the last glimmer, then settling on the tripod as I packed up. Only one lens had captured him, with no secondary angle to confirm what I'd seen. I thought about going back, confronting whoever it was, but each time I imagined crossing that dark lot, I saw him stepping out from the pines, watching me, so I didn't return. Tuesday arrived. Working my usual systems analyst job at a small IT firm, I was surprised when the receptionist announced a visitor. Walking to the lobby, I saw him, same black suit, same dark fedora, hands precisely at his sides, no badge, no identification, no belongings. Just standing, staring through the glass door. When I entered, he looked up. His eyes were shadowed, but radiated an unsettling calm, like a predator assessing its prey. "Mr. Ellis?" he asked. I nodded. He pressed a finger to his lips, then opened a leather-bound folder on the counter. Inside lay a single typed page. Observations. Subject: light phenomena at Mirror Lake. I was hiking the Weatherford Trail before sunrise, hoping to reach Shelter Rock by noon. When I came around a bend, just as the mist was lifting off the pines, there it was, a black sedan, engine ticking hot, tires sunk an inch into the dirt. This was no rental or local vehicle. No plates, no decals, just a sleek, unmarked car parked sideways across the single track, doors closed tight, windows dark. I stopped about 20 feet out, swallowed some water, and tried to make sense of it. No footprints beyond mine, no keys on the hood, nothing obvious pointing to its owner. The engine was still warm enough that heat wisped off the metal like breath. I wasn't sure whether to check inside or continue hiking, but a pressing need to pee suddenly shifted my focus. What if someone was inside, hurt or trapped? Later, back at my desk, I was confronted by a man with an unreadable expression. He extended a folder toward me like a plate. "I'm an interested party in Reflections," he said. "I'd like to know what you've seen." I cleared my throat. "Who are you?" He didn't answer. Around us, the receptionist pretended to file papers. Someone in the waiting area stared at her phone. No one was paying attention. I backed off. "I don't know what you're talking about." He tapped the folder. "The footage. Transfer the files to me. We'll discuss terms." I shook my head. He stared at me for what felt like a minute, then closed the folder and slipped it back inside his jacket. "Very well," he said softly, "but know this. Reflections can be done." His voice hit me like a slap. He walked out without another word. The receptionist looked up at me, brows furrowed, as the door closed. My phone vibrated, a text from an unknown number. "Don't share those videos." I haven't shared them. The footage sits on a hidden drive. I haven't returned to Mirror Lake, but sometimes late at night when the power flickers, I swear I see shapes moving in the glass. Faint glimmers behind my window like pale lights repeating the patterns I filmed. And once on the security cam outside my apartment, I thought I saw someone in a dark suit standing under the street lamp, backlit by fog before the frame went static. The recording device was my personal phone and DSLR. Post-processing was not authorized. I was an interested party in Reflections. I walked forward, my boots sinking into the soft earth, and peered into the passenger window. The front seat was empty, no purse, no backpack, no phone. The glove box remained closed. The center console latched. I knocked on the glass first softly, then harder. No response. When I tried the door handle, it clicked but wouldn't open, seeming locked. Crouching down, I shined my flashlight into the back seat. A single military green nylon duffel bag sat zipped shut, resting as if it had been placed just moments ago. Nothing else was visible. No blood, no signs of struggle. My heart raced. Part of me wanted to walk away, to pretend I hadn't discovered anything. The sense of responsibility held me in place. I set down my pack and reached for my phone to call the ranger station at Cold Spring Camp. No reception. I tried again. Nothing. As a precaution, I snapped photos of the license plate area, just blank metal, and circled to the driver's side. The story was the same. Locked, empty with a warm engine. Sunlight was growing stronger, breaking over the ridge. Unzipping the duffel bag, I found 3 rolled black shirts, a pair of dark socks, and a thin envelope stamped, "Not for public release." The envelope was sealed with no visible name or date. I quickly replaced everything, zipping the bag and leaving it on the roof of the car. Back at my pack, I wrestled with a decision. Should I carry the bag down for help? It was heavy and awkward. More importantly, I didn't know what that mysterious envelope contained and didn't want responsibility for potentially dangerous contents. I switched my phone to airplane mode and decided to hike to the next junction, about 3 miles away, where cell signals sometimes reached. If I could make contact, I'd report what I'd found. During the hike, an unsettling feeling crept over me, a sense of being watched. Though no person was visible, that prickly sensation persisted. I stopped twice, spinning in circles. Only trees, rocks, and shifting shadows surrounded me. At the junction's granite outcrop, where hikers traditionally carve their names, I paused and tried my phone. One bar appeared. I dialed park headquarters, which rang twice before switching to voicemail. Ranger Salazar's message prompted me to press 1 for urgent matters. After another ring, static clicked in. I quickly reported my location, the warm car, and the sealed envelope marked "Not for public release." My message was direct. "Please send someone. Thank you." Then I ended the call. I hiked the trail, my nerves steady but alert. Midway through the morning, I paused on a boulder, eating a granola bar while fog drifted through pine trees. My phone buzzed after about 30 minutes. An unknown number sent a cryptic message. "Turn back." I studied the text, my thumb hovering over the call button. No voicemail, no caller ID. I deleted it and waited another 20 minutes. No park vehicles appeared. Something felt off, so I started back toward my car, my stomach tight with an undefined tension. The clearing where I'd left my car was empty. No tire marks, no evidence of movement, just disturbed ground where the vehicle had been parked. The duffel bag lay light and empty. Without hesitation, I grabbed it and headed down the trail. By late afternoon, I reached Cold Spring Camp. The ranger station, a weather day frame cabin with 2 windows and a sliding door, looked quiet. Ranger Perkins sat inside, sorting maps behind a battered desk. I explained everything. The car, the envelope, the strange message. She frowned and checked her logbook, flipping pages slowly. "No interference reports today," she said neutrally. When I pointed out the envelope details, she tapped the desk. Trail cameras had been glitching near the ridge, experiencing weird electrical disruptions. Radio jamming, GPS interference common near the communication towers. I mentioned the car's disappearance. She promised to send someone in the morning to investigate. I handed over the duffel bag, which she locked in a storage locker. That night, I stayed in a simple camper cabin with just a cot and propane heater. At dusk, I walked to the picnic tables. Communication towers loomed overhead, their red lights blinking steadily. Drinking instant coffee, my mind kept circling back to the car. Those shirts, the cryptic envelope label, what wasn't meant for public release. Around 9 p.m., a rattling sound broke the silence. I opened the door to find 2 men in immaculate black suits standing just beyond the porch light. They looked ordinary except for their perfectly pressed clothing, no badges, no identification connecting them to any official service. The night was crisp when I rolled into Pine Creek Station just past 11 p.m. Late October's chill made my breath visible as I stepped out onto the gravel lot. The neon sign buzzed and flickered through a settling river fog, casting a dim glow over the empty station. My gas tank was nearly empty, and I was done worrying about making it to the next stop. After filling up, I returned to my car and noticed 2 men approaching. The taller one greeted me with a polite but distant "evening." His companion asked about reported interference. I mentioned Ranger Perkins had just taken a duffel bag and talked about GPS jamming. They seemed unsurprised, nodding in recognition. The tall one pressed for more details. Had I seen anything unusual? Lights? Sounds? I recalled the warm car engine I'd found earlier, a mysterious envelope, and the phantom phone message. I shared what I knew. The shorter man cut our conversation short with a curt "thank you. That will be all." No smile, no further questions. They walked away, heading down the path toward the station, disappearing into darkness without flashlights. The night remained still, with only cricket sounds and pine needles drifting in the breeze. I locked the cabin door and went to sleep. Morning brought more mysteries. The duffel bag had vanished from the locker. Ranger Perkins denied ever seeing it. No interference was logged. The trail crew found no trace of the car, and my GPS logs showed nothing. I hiked out early that day, avoiding Shelter Rock and taking the main road back to town. At home, I installed a new backpack lock and trashed the envelope photo. Sometimes I drive past that logging road, glancing up at Tower Ridge. Nothing seems out of place. Just quiet forest and the distant town hum. But occasionally my phone buzzes with a message from an unknown number, and I never open it. I was gassing up my hatchback at a dimly lit station when 2 identical black sedans caught my eye. One was parked about 20 feet away, perfectly positioned. A man in a crisp suit sat motionless in the driver's seat, staring straight ahead through tinted windows. When I called out softly, he didn't even twitch. Another sedan mirrored the first on the opposite side of the lot, engine idling quietly. Its driver was a carbon copy. Same suit, same rigid posture, face hidden behind dark sunglasses. Their tail lights glowed a faint red, as if just switched off. After filling up and grabbing a soda inside, I chatted with Derek, the late-night clerk. He seemed unconcerned about the mysterious cars, suggesting they might be hunters parked for the night. But something felt off. Back in my car, I locked the doors and watched the sedans in my mirrors. As I pulled onto the cracked pavement, both cars came to life simultaneously. Their engines crackled and they followed me precisely, maintaining a steady 30-foot distance behind. The whole scene had an eerie, calculated precision. Two cars, two identical drivers, moving with an unsettling synchronization that made my skin crawl. I'd wanted to take a photo, but my dying phone battery prevented me. Now all I could do was drive and watch them trailing me through the night. The sedans came out of nowhere, one heading north on Route 89, the other turning down the little road to the river crossing. I slowed to a crawl, blinking hard. Coincidence, I told myself. Just timing and fog and two drivers leaving at once. But when I looked again, the road was empty. No cars, no skid marks, no fading headlights. Just black pavement reflecting my taillights. I exhaled sharply, nearly clearing the fog from my rear window. Turning on the defroster, I gripped the wheel and drove north. Staying under 30 miles per hour, I scanned every curve, searching for those sedans. Nothing. For the next 15 miles, not a single vehicle crossed my path. No trucks, no headlights piercing the fog. The radio dial brought only static. An old country station sputtered in and out, playing no recognizable songs. I rolled down the windows. Silence. Just the engine and wind tugging at the fog's edges. Gold Ridge Road Junction passed, and I considered stopping to check my mirrors. But the thought of stepping into that black mist kept me moving. Home. My warm apartment. Daylight. At mile mark 103, the fog lifted. Street lights appeared. A cluster of homes glowed with lit windows. I pulled into my driveway at exactly 12:07 a.m. No cars. No footprints in the gravel. Leaning back, I tried to steady my breathing. In the morning, I'd convinced myself it was a dream. But the next day at work, a receipt in my purse told a different story. Pine Creek Station, dated 11:09 p.m., 9 minutes later than I remembered. I asked a coworker if I sometimes lingered in my car. He laughed. Receipts print in real time. But I remembered pumping gas, paying before 11:05. The receipt showed pump 2, the side nearest the first sedan with its engine off. What was I doing there at 11:09? That weekend, I returned in daylight. Clear sky, warm sun. The station looked different. Rusty pumps. No neon sign. Someone had taken the old. I'd been inside for hours, curled up with a book when I glanced out the window and saw the moon, full and fat over the maple. Just before midnight, I stepped onto my back deck. The air was cool for early May, and the sky was so clear you could see every star. I grabbed my phone and dashed outside, setting it on the rail and switching to night mode, aiming at the glowing orb. My hands were steady. I'd taken pictures of the moon dozens of times. Always the same pale craters, the same soft glow. But this time, halfway through the tap to focus, something darted across the moon's face. Not a bird or a cloud. No wings, just a dark shape sliding in a straight line, smooth and silent, cutting the lunar disk in half for maybe a heartbeat. I snapped the photo and hurried to check it. On the small screen, the moon looked perfect, except for a black slash across the top third, like someone had drawn a line with a marker. I zoomed in. The line had depth, a subtle curve, but no edges that looked solid. It was more like a shadow that didn't belong. I set up my tripod and switched to my DSLR, a Canon I'd borrowed from my brother months ago. I snapped 3 more shots before the shadow vanished. In each, the moon was perfect except for that same strange line every time in the same spot, shifting ever so slightly. I felt a thrill. Maybe a bat flew close to the lens, or a bug crawled across the sensor. But the line was too crisp, too smooth, too deliberate. I left the camera on the tripod and stepped back, looking up through my binoculars. The moon was unblemished again, bright, whole, silent. Nothing floated in front of it. No planes overhead, no birds, just me and the maple branches swaying in the breeze. The next morning, during my coffee break, I brought the images onto my laptop. They were still there, the moon sliced by that dark curve in each frame. I stared at the pixels, lowered my mug. Earlier that day, I'd driven past the old Pine Creek Station site, just an empty lot now. A skeleton shell of concrete and broken windows. I poked around. No sign of 2 sedans ever parking there. No security camera, no barrier arms, just empty gravel and tufts of grass, popping through cracks. I'd filled my tank at a chain station down the road, paid exactly $20, and kept the quiet hum of regular life going. But every time I drive past where Pine Creek Station used to be, I glance at the gravel and wonder who was sitting behind those dark windows that night and where they went when I left. I bumped up the exposure and the curve took on a faint metallic sheen. The rest of the shot stayed exactly the same. No other anomalies in the sky. At lunch, I showed Mark the photo. He suggested it looked like a volcanic shadow, a plume drifting in front of the moon. But there hadn't been any eruptions in weeks. We joked about a lunar eclipse gone wrong. Mark laughed, but his brow creased slightly. That evening, I printed the photo on glossy paper and clipped it to the fridge with a snail-shaped magnet. Before bed, I stared at the black arc glaring across the bright moon. The house was quiet. I drifted off around 11:15. Morning brought a plain white envelope on the kitchen counter with no return address or stamp. Inside was my identical photo, but someone had torn out the curved section across the moon, leaving a jagged semicircle. The missing chunk matched exactly the black curve I'd seen. My heart raced as I turned the photo over. No notes, just blank matte paper. Holding it up to the light, I could see my floral countertop through the hole. The torn edge felt fresh and fibrous, like it had been cut out just an hour ago. I checked the kitchen. Front door locked, windows closed. I'd come straight home from work yesterday with no stops or deliveries. The envelope must have appeared after midnight or before I woke up. My phone buzzed with routine notifications. A weather alert for afternoon showers, a news headline about a minor train delay. Nothing about lunar shadows or stolen photos. I looked at the fridge. The original print was gone. The snail magnet held an empty spot which made me jump. Checking behind the fridge revealed nothing. No paper scraps, no photo fragments, just a smooth metal surface. I wrapped the torn photo in an envelope and stuffed it into my bag. At work, I couldn't focus. The screen felt too bright, the chair too stiff. Every time I considered stepping outside, I imagined someone watching, waiting to slip away the real photo and leave another blank moon postcard. After dinner, I walked the dog, constantly looking over my shoulder. I was walking Scout early one morning in May, just as the sky turned lavender and the sun peeked behind low clouds. My neighborhood sits where sidewalks give way to pine forests, so our routine involves a quick morning walk through the woods before heading back home. This particular morning was cool and damp following 2 days of rain. We followed the narrow path that winds behind neighborhood backyards, threading under tangled alder branches. Scout sniffed at an old tree stump while I huddled in my hoodie, finishing the last of my travel mud coffee. A thin mist hung between the tree trunks like a delicate veil. Suddenly, Scout went completely still. His ears perked up, and he strained against the leash. When I looked up, I saw something strange hovering just above the treetops, about 30 feet off the ground. It was an oval shape, pale and yellow-white, almost like a street lamp softly wrapped in silk. It didn't have wings, and it made no sound. Instead of moving, it seemed to slide smoothly toward a clearing in the pine trees. My heart raced. I reached for my phone, but the moment I did, something changed. Later that night, I found myself walking home, trying to clear my thoughts. The moon hung full and unmarred overhead. Casting no streetlights created soft halos through the humid air, and the neighborhood looked perfectly ordinary, kids' bikes in driveways, laundry hanging on lines. Back home, I checked my camera bag. Both memory cards were present, still holding the moonlight images. I connected my DSLR to the laptop and scrolled through the photos. The arc appeared in every single shot. Trembling, I copied the raw files to a backup drive and closed the laptop. As night deepened, a soft rustle near the window caught my attention. Peering out, I saw only leaves moving in the wind. But then, in the corner of my eye, a dark shape slipped away from the fence. When I blinked, the yard was empty. Maple trees swayed, a single leaf brushing against the glass. I went to bed, leaving a torn photo on the nightstand. Moonlight slanted through the blinds, illuminating the cutout like a keyhole. I stared until my eyes grew heavy. No more envelopes have arrived. I haven't reprinted the photo, but the raw files remain hidden on that backup drive. And sometimes, when the moon rises in that exact position over the maple trees, I half expect to see a silent, wingless shadow flicker across it, wondering who else might be watching. As the light slipped behind the trees, I switched on my phone's flashlight. The woods seemed quiet, just wet needles and tangled undergrowth. Scout refused to move, his body tense and staring intently at the spot where the light had vanished. No matter how I called or coaxed him, he remained frozen, shaking his head with an almost feline stubbornness. His wide eyes locked onto something I couldn't see. When I stepped forward, he sat abruptly, pulling the leash taut. I knelt beside him, scanning the empty path. No tracks marred the muddy ground. Switching my phone to camera mode, I panned slowly across the forest. Nothing unusual caught my eye. My hand trembled as I pressed the shutter once. The photo revealed only grey trees and moss, no hint of anything strange. I unclipped Scout's harness, letting him run free as we headed back. He bounded ahead while I kept glancing behind, half expecting some strange glow to emerge from the tree line. That evening felt unsettling. An odd sensation prickled my skin, as if hidden eyes watched from room corners. I kept checking the living room window, anticipating a pale light sliding past. Before bed, I set up my old Wi-Fi security cameras near the front door, positioning them carefully and ensuring motion-triggered recording. Scout settled at my feet as I drifted off around 10:30. At 7 a.m., my phone buzzed with a notification. Camera 1 had detected motion at 3:17 a.m. Dread washed over me as I tapped to view the footage. Black screens greeted me. Camera 1, 2, and 3 were blank. But one clip remained unoverwritten. 4 seconds of grainy black and white footage from camera 1, time-stamped precisely at 3:17. I pressed play. The front porch emerged in dim streetlight. Twice, the doorbell rang, slow and deliberate. The scene widened to reveal two figures standing close together. They wore identical dark suits, crisp white shirts, and polished shoes. Their hair was perfectly neat, no hats obscuring their faces. I woke up at 2:45 a.m. to rain pattering on the porch roof, drifting back to sleep. At 3:17, I jolted awake. No doorbell, just raindrops. Scout breathed steadily beside me. Earlier that day, I'd downloaded a strange video clip after discovering two men in black suits standing motionless at my door. Their heads were tilted down, only their shoe shine and stiff shoulders visible. No badges, no briefcases, just two figures frozen by my doorbell at 3:17 a.m. My hands trembled so badly I had to set down my phone. The hallway light was off. The front door loomed in darkness, watching. I texted a friend to come over without explaining why. He rang the doorbell twice, then left. Nothing happened. All day I felt heavy. Watched. I rewound the morning's video feed. Black screens everywhere, except that single snippet. I emailed the clip to myself, deleted and reinstalled the app. The blank cameras remained blank. That night, I unplugged the cameras and placed a cheap desk lamp in the hallway instead of the red bulb. Scout slept on the bed. I left the door unlocked, unable to face potential midnight bell rings. In the morning, I studied the clip again. Those two silhouettes haunted me. I considered destroying the evidence, but instead saved the file, transferred it to a USB key, and locked it in my desk drawer. I still walk Scout past the pine edge every morning, but I don't stop in the clearing. I don't raise my phone. I don't watch for lights. I tell myself it was just a glitch or a prank. Yet Scout's eyes always dart to the tree line when we pass. Late at night, a soft doorbell seems to echo through the rain, quiet, like a promise. Earlier, at Black Rock Cafe, I'd wiped down the counter as the sun set behind the ridge. Outside, the quarry sky bruised purple, exactly how people described seeing strange lights bounce off limestone walls. Rumors and flash stories had filled the night. The cafe was quiet, save for the occasional clink of ceramic and the soft hum of the espresso machine. I was steaming milk when a customer named John started talking about something strange he'd seen at Miller's Pit. Orange spheres, completely silent, hovering over the rocky landscape before vanishing. I half listened, more focused on not burning the milk. John described massive lights, about 15 feet wide. He'd tried to record them, but they seemed to flicker away whenever he attempted to capture footage. Maybe he was imagining things, he admitted with a shrug. As he stared out the window, lost in thought, the door chimed. A man in a crisp black suit entered, his shoes gleaming under the neon sign. He scanned the nearly empty cafe without making eye contact, then walked directly to John's table and sat down. The fluorescent light seemed to dim as the stranger spoke. "Tell me about the lights," he said flatly, without introduction or explanation. No ID, no small talk, just a direct demand. John looked uncomfortable. He repeated his earlier story about the orange lights, describing the back roads and abandoned areas where he'd seen them. The man listened intently, nodding once, his face completely blank. He didn't take notes, just watched John with an unnerving mechanical focus. When John finished his coffee, he stood abruptly. "I've got to go," he mumbled, catching my eye with a significant glance. I nodded, sensing something was off but unable to pinpoint exactly what. As John left, the suited man remained perfectly still, watching. I sat at the kitchen table, steam from my tea curling upward, thinking about the strange encounter at the cafe. Earlier, John had been sitting with a man in black who spoke with an unsettling, robotic flatness. The man's parting words, "Be safe," echoed in my mind as John hurried out without looking back. After closing up the cafe, I had driven home on Route 47, windows down despite the chill. The quarry lay silent and dark to my right, with just a distant street lamp glowing. I'd resisted the urge to turn down the gravel road, knowing better than to chase ghost stories in the darkness. At home, I'd turned on every light and checked my phone. No missed calls, no unknown texts, just John's message. The quiet click of my laptop fan sounded too mechanical, making me uneasy. I wanted to text John back, to ask if he was okay, but what could I say? Outside, soft headlights passed. For a moment, I thought I saw a dark shape at the window, but it was just the neighbor's cat. My racing heart began to calm. I pulled up the local news site, scanning for anything unusual. Municipal meetings, a high school band story, a missing cat, nothing about mysterious men or secret cafe meetings. Sleep was elusive. I checked the alarm clock repeatedly. 10:03 a.m., then 1 o'clock, then lying awake until 3:30. Every creak in the house sounded like footsteps on gravel. When morning finally came, the light felt weak and pale. I brewed coffee, adding too much cream to make it sweet, and stared out at the empty street. I considered calling John, wondering if he'd seen the man again, or experienced flickering lights. But I didn't. At 7:15, I left for my shift, taking the same route past the quarry, the memory of that strange encounter still lingering. Headlights cut through the mist, pine trees looming on either side. No glow, no sign of anyone near the cut line. I parked at the cafe lot and stepped inside, the door chime ringing out. The morning rush was beginning. A few regulars sat at the counter, their presence familiar and comforting. The neon sign hummed back to life as I wiped the bar top, wondering if the man was still out there somewhere in the fog, taking notes and waiting. Marisol approached for her cappuccino. "You okay?" "You look tired," she said. I shrugged. "Long night." She nodded and sipped her drink. My eyes drifted to the empty booth where John and the stranger had sat, a strange prickle crawling up my neck. I glanced out the window. Nothing but mist and streetlight cones. Turning back, I tossed my cloth into the rag bin. The espresso machine hissed as I dropped a puck into the knockbox and reached for beans. The overhead lights felt harsh, almost accusatory. Closing early crossed my mind, but I put on some mellow jazz instead. Lunch came and went. No one mentioned the quarry lights. No one asked about the man in the suit. It was as if last night had been erased, a collective agreement to stay silent. By evening, the incident had faded into memory. At 9:15, I locked up, set the alarm, and walked to my car. The sky was clear, stars steady and bright. Driving away, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. Dark eyes, pale face, a lingering question. I didn't look back. Just after midnight, I was up on Eagle Ridge. My old Jeep had carried me up the service road at dusk, parked beside the weathered plywood shack I'd built last summer. The Celestron 8 telescope sat mounted on its Dobsonian base. The air was cool, but not cold. A moonless sky stretched above, scattered with planets and thousands of stars. My focus was on one unremarkable point in Cygnus, a star I'd been tracking for months. Amateur catalogues called it the Blink Star, a curious celestial object that would vanish for seconds when magnification passed 200 times, then reappear. Headlights on, fog behind me fading. I kept going, waiting for something new to blur the line between what I'd seen and what I'd been told. I'd been dismissing previous anomalies as atmospheric interference or technical issues, but something felt off this particular night. My telescope was set to 250x magnification, the star crisp and sharp in the eyepiece. Initially, its blinking wasn't unusual. I'd seen this before. At 12:13 a.m., the star suddenly vanished. 20 seconds later, it reappeared. I meticulously recorded the 20.4-second interval in my notebook and increased magnification to 300x. More reappearing. After the third return, everything went black. I verified the lens cap was off, swapped eyepieces, and my heart started racing. The finder scope showed a perfect sky, but the star's location was now empty. I checked power connections. The mount's control box LED blinked steadily. Pressing the override button triggered computer flickering and motor movement. The star field returned, but my target star was gone. Desperate, I attached my smartphone adapter and captured a photo. Processing revealed only tiny stars against darkness. No trace of the missing star. A dim, orange glow caught my attention behind the valley's ridge. Initially mistaking it for headlights or a hiker's lantern, it remained stationary for 5 minutes before fading. I logged this in my notebook. Something else was wrong. My watch ran 2 minutes slow, despite always syncing before leaving. My phone showed 12:19, but the NTP server wouldn't connect. Cell service was dead. I tried my ham radio. Alpha Sierra November. Does anyone copy? Only static answered, even on different channels. My fingers growing numb, I checked my phone. Camera, weather app, compass, all frozen. Rebooting reset the clock to 12:20 a.m. when I opened the camera roll. My earlier star photos had vanished completely. The sky was still, no ridge glow or blinking star in sight. I'd been up on the ridge since around 7 p.m., though time felt unreliable. My telescope mount suddenly snagged while I was packing up, humming despite being unpowered. With a final tug, it slammed against the plywood, shattering the eyepiece. By the time I loaded the broken telescope into my Jeep, dawn was breaking and Cygnus had vanished. Driving down the gravel road, I struggled with navigation. My phone's GPS showed no signal, and offline maps were useless. I took wrong turns twice before finally finding the main road by chance. When I reached my driveway, the dashboard clock read 6:02 a.m., matching the sunrise. The broken eyepiece shards rested in a paper bag on the passenger seat, and my notebook lay open in the glove box, with scribbled notes about the ridge light's 5-minute duration. Inside my quiet house, phone service finally returned. 8 missed calls from my brother and 1 from an unknown number greeted me. When I called him back, he mentioned texting about dinner and claimed I'd answered his first call at 7 a.m., something I had no memory of. My camera's memory card still held shaky star photos, but each file's timestamp read the same, imgl.jpg. I dropped the broken eyepiece into my desk drawer, rubbed my eyes, and glanced at the clock. 6:35 a.m., no texts from the unknown number, no voicemail, just silence and confusion. I pulled off the gravel road just before sunrise, engine ticking as it cooled. The morning fog hung low over my cornfield, thick enough that I couldn't see the far edge. I grabbed my thermos and flashlight, locked the cab, and headed out to check the new irrigation lines I'd laid last week. The air smelled like damp earth and green stalks. The corn was missing. At first I thought I'd misremembered where the new lines ran, but when I got closer, the stalks ended abruptly against perfectly straight lines. I crouched and ran a hand over the cut stalks. No ragged edges, just smooth, even shears about waist high. The flattened area formed a hexagon, each side exactly as long as the next. I shone my flashlight over the ground. Every stalk leaned at the same angle, pressed into the soil like someone had ironed it flat. No footprints, no tire tracks, nothing to show how anyone got it. The fog muted all sound. Even the birds were quiet. I looked back toward the farmhouse, still too far to make out details, and sat down on a cut stalk to collect my thoughts. My boots pressed into damp soil. Every step into the flattened patch left a clear heel imprint. But outside those 6 sides, the ground was untouched. Not a single track across the perimeter. I walked back to the barn, wondering if a weather balloon or an egg drone gone wrong could explain it. My black lab Bess caught sight of me at the door and ran out. Later that day, I drove up to the observatory to download the mount's logs. Maybe they recorded power surges or firmware errors. But the control box was gone, wrenched off its shelf with rough gouges in the plywood walls. The mount itself was missing, only jagged metal shavings on the floor marked where it had been. I walked back through the woods in the afternoon light. The ridge was still and empty. No hunters, no lights, no signs of equipment, just trees and rocks. I still look up at the stars every night, but I don't go back to Eagle Ridge. Once in a while I catch a glimpse of a dim point in the sky that twitches, but I don't linger. I tell friends I lost interest in Blink Star. I tell myself that makes sense. And I swear sometimes in the darkest hour before dawn, I hear the soft hum of a mount's motors spinning into place. But there's nothing there but empty sky. I was out checking the corn when my dog turned back toward the house, whining. Can't blame her. Something felt off. By mid-morning, the fog had burned away and sunlight warmed the fields. I was tightening a bolt on the pump, my mind stuck on that strange hexagon pattern in my field. I'd plowed hundreds of acres over my lifetime, but never seen anything like this. Rick wasn't answering his phone, so I texted him a photo. The stalks were bent low, gleaming in the sunlight, though oddly the image had no timestamp. The cell tower must be acting up. At noon, I loaded 3 ice-cold sodas into my pickup. The AC was shot, so I drove with windows down, dust swirling inside the cab. By the time I reached the equipment shed, my shirt was soaked with sweat. I grabbed a wrench, planning to check the planter's drive belt. Machinery always felt more comfortable to me than those eerie cornfield remnants. That's when I saw them. 2 men emerged from the tree line, walking with identical, measured steps, 12 feet apart, perfectly synchronized. Black suits, white shirts, narrow black ties, no bags, no hats. Their eyes were hidden in shadow, shoes polished to a shine. They stopped at the field's corner. The taller one studied the bent stalks, then looked at me without emotion. I set down my wrench and wiped my hands. "Can I help you?" The shorter man's voice was flat, rehearsed. "Did anything change in the soil?" I gestured at the hexagon. "In 20 years of farming, I've never seen anything like this. The soil gets compacted, but these lines..." The tall man nodded, observing the clean geometric pattern. No tracks, no debris. "This suggests external pressure applied evenly." He crouched, running a gloved finger across the ground. I shook my head. "No way. I'd have seen signs on the monitor, and herbicide would kill the plants, not flatten them like this." I stood at the edge of the flattened cornfield, brushing off my pants after working neatly. 2 men had just spoken with me about the irrigation lines and possible ground disturbances. The taller one handed me a plain white envelope with an unfamiliar code stamped on it. Inside were test protocols and a date 3 days out with no letterhead or signature, just instructions to await a technician's arrival. I looked up and asked who they were. "An appropriate liaison," he said, and they both vanished into the maple and oak trees bordering the field, leaving only birdsong behind. The sun was high, turning corn stalks yellow around the perimeter. I tucked the envelope in my back pocket and returned to the shed, glancing over my shoulder. My phone had rung earlier. Rick calling, but I'd ignored it. The new irrigation lines ran south of the east field, not where we were standing. That evening I found another official folder in my toolbox. Same white paper, same cryptic code. Under the shop's fluorescent light, I noticed no adhesive or staples holding it together. Someone must have placed it there during my absence. I drove home on the lane road, dust trailing behind my truck, sweat cooling on my neck. Best, my dog, rode in the passenger seat with ears back. At the mailbox, I paused and studied the envelope before tossing it inside and slamming the lid. No one watched. In my kitchen, I boiled water for instant coffee and flipped through TV channels. Only reruns and weather reports filled the screen, with a local news mention of a road closure nearby. No explanation for the morning's strange encounter emerged. My shift at Dry Mesa Radio Observatory was quiet that windless September night. The sky stretched out above, clear enough to see the Milky Way arcing over the southern dish. It was just after 10 p.m., and I sat in my folding chair next to the control shack, coffee in hand, scanning telemetry readouts for any stray transmissions. The dishes were routine, tracking cosmic noise, sunspots, mostly background hiss. But at 10:17, something changed. The left-hand monitor sputtered into white noise, went dead silent for a moment, then snapped back with the faintest pulse, like a distant mic tap. I frowned and tapped the screen. No error messages. The other dishes remained normal. I keyed the handheld radio. "Control to dish 4. Anything on your end?" Silence answered. The usual comfortable quiet now felt too deep. I stood and crouched behind the shack, peering around the corner. Steel dishes sprawled across the plateau, each pointing at a different slice of sky. No trucks, no lights, no wind. I forced a laugh and returned to my chair, logging the glitch. At 11:03 p.m., the radio came alive again. That same soft tapping, now synchronized across all channels. I ran to the dish controls and muted them. Static tapestries fell silent, leaving only the generator's hum. Then I saw it, a pale amber light like a slow-burning ember, drifting just above the western horizon. This wasn't a plane. It didn't zip or flicker or blink. Instead, it moved at what seemed like a walking pace, except suspended 1,000 feet up. I grabbed binoculars from the rack. The light was too small to determine its shape, but it had a gentle glow. No headlight beam, no strobes, no contrail. Just a single orb moving steadily. I switched to a telephoto lens, mounting it on the tripod and framing the horizon between 2 dishes. The light held steady, then dipped below the mesa's rim. Later, standing in the back doorway, I listened to crickets beneath the stars. The flattened pattern looked small from here, a pale scar in my mind. Tomorrow, I'd mark the field and avoid that patch until the technicians arrived. Until then, the soil would keep its silent secret, and I'd keep checking for tracks that never appeared. I tracked the generator's hiccup, a brief cough of fuel, right where the light vanished. Checking the logging software revealed a 6-second power draw dip. The dish motor readouts flickered, then stabilized. No external interference showed up, no grid spikes, no radar returns on the base scanners. I pulled on a jacket and walked to the fence, scanning the empty horizon. Only scrub pines and the ranch road broke the landscape. For an hour, I paced between dishes, straining to hear any rotor wash or engine hum. With no phone signal out here, no cell, no internet, I couldn't check aircraft notices. A radio call to the Hilltop Station's on-duty astronomer brought only static. Back in the shack, I logged the anomaly at 11:03 and returned to watching for cosmic rays. Morning arrived cool and grey, with maintenance crew trucks rolling up the hill by 6:30. At the gate, 2 men in black suits stood by the guardhouse. No badges, no hats, just crisp, starched shirts. They ignored me as I swiped my valid ID badge. "Morning, Dan," I called to Clyde. Both turned simultaneously. The taller one identified himself as Marcus Hall, his tone flat and expressionless. He handed me a manila folder. "Review this," he said, checking his phone without looking down. The other man stood back, hands clasped, tie perfectly straight, shoes immaculate. Their low conversation caught fragments. Shift log, omit, discuss offline. Inside the folder, a printout of my entry showed 113 anomaly, marked classified. Typed below, "Do not discuss incident with anyone. Authority level blackside access required." When I protested describing the light's movement behind the mesa, the taller man stepped forward. Polite but cold, he stated flatly. No movement registered on their sensor arrays, no power fluctuation, no radio interference. Just a spurious signal, nothing more. My hands shook as I sipped coffee from the break room pot, staring out the window. Earlier that morning, he'd handed the folder back with a final, neutral tone. "You're cleared for standard duty," he'd said, "but you will not log or speak of the incident again." His companion followed him through the gate, and they walked down the hill together, their footsteps crunching in unison until the scrub pines swallowed them. Back in the control shack, I tore out the log page with the anomaly entry and tossed it in the burn barrel behind the generator shed. Smoke curled toward the dishes as a falcon wheeled overhead, sharp eyes scanning for field mice. The sky was pale blue. At lunch, I scanned the shift logs. Nothing. No entry for 11:03, no note of power dip, no mention of radio glitch. It was like I'd never written anything. I waited for that amber light to drift back into view. The afternoon passed with dish motors humming through calibrations. The astronomer called for clear data, and I punched the keys. Sensors checked out. No anomalies. I watched the sunset through the east window, orange and red behind the antenna. On my way home, I stopped at the junction above the mesa. Its rim cut a clean line against the sky. I sat in the car, headlights off, radio silent. Nothing moved. No lights dipped over the horizon, no humming, just the scent of pinyon and juniper. Driving down the gravel road toward my trailer, I felt eyes on me from the ridge. I glanced up. Empty. Town lights appeared as small dots in the darkness. At home, I opened a fresh notebook and wrote, September 12th, 11:03 p.m. Observed slow-moving amber light dip below mesa. Power generator hiccup. Sensor panel reset. Radio silence. No radar returns. Folder labeled classified. Instructed to omit. I read it twice, closed the book, and locked it in my drawer. Outside, the night settled without a sound. In bed, I listened to the trailer's metal roof creak under a high wind. Closing my eyes, I saw that light again, a steady glow descending over bare rock, disappearing like someone had lowered a lamp behind a curtain. 2 men in black suits, faces unreadable, telling me what I could and couldn't see. Just after 5 in the afternoon, I lifted off from Pine Valley Airstrip. The southern Oregon sun still blazed overhead, warming the cockpit of my rented Cessna 172. An amateur pilot with a simple mission: circle the Rogue River Canyon, capture some landscape shots, and return before sunset. Climbing to 3,500 feet, I noticed the wind picking up from the west. The radio buzzed with talk of a small brush fire near Dry Creek Road. Fire crews had it contained, but a smoke plume lingered nearby. Curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to swing past for a closer look. The canyon corridor was clear, so I banked east toward the distant haze. By 5:25, I was hovering above the fire. Below, a stark landscape of red-orange flames and blackened earth stretched out. Heat rose against the plane's belly, creating a subtle shudder reminiscent of driving over rough terrain. As I prepared to photograph the scene, something unusual caught my eye above the smoke. 6 silent, glowing orbs hovered about 100 feet above the tree line. At first glance, they appeared pale and almost white. Zooming in revealed a soft amber core surrounded by a thin halo. They formed a loose V shape, each orb spaced about 30 feet apart, moving in unison with the breeze. No prop wash, no strobe flicker, just a gentle drift. The radio chatter faded into the background, and even the engine noise seemed muted. I cracked the window, straining to hear anything beyond the propeller's hum and rushing wind. Something made me hesitate to report the strange sight. Then they began to disperse, drifting apart, and seeming to melt into the surrounding woods. I snapped a few more photos before banking north to climb out of the thermal updraft. By 5:40, I was clear of the smoke and heading back to Pine Valley. My camera's memory card was filled with fireline images and grainy shots of the mysterious orbs. My heart raced, but I rationalized the experience. Probably some fire district balloon experiment monitoring air currents. I radioed the tower and received clearance to land, the strange encounter already feeling like a surreal dream. The late afternoon air was cool as I taxied onto runway 21, cutting the engine and stepping out. A fuel truck idled near the hangar, and 2 mechanics waved. I gave them a quick nod, heading to the pilot's lounge to download my photos. That's when he materialized. Tall and lean, wearing a black suit that seemed out of place on the dusty tarmac, he approached with a measured stride. No pilot's wings, no name tag, just dark glasses and a slim black tie. His hands were clasped behind his back. "Captain Lewis," he said, voice smooth. When I shook his hand, his grip was firm and dry. I asked if he was with the fire department. He shook his head. "Just a concerned observer." My stomach tightened. He knew about the orbs over Dry Creek. I'd been circling the fire, capturing shots that now seemed to weigh heavily in my camera. "You've seen too much," he said. His request was clear. "Report these as weather balloons. The county occasionally launches the near prospect for wind data." He pronounced prospect like a secret code. His smile was just a flicker at the corner of his mouth. "Routine," he said. "No need to report anything unusual." A plain white card appeared in his hand, stamped with the airstrip logo and phone number. "Call tomorrow," he instructed. "Say balloon release confirmed. They'll understand." I pocketed the card. He turned and walked away, moving as if a music box had just been wound. No goodbye, no hesitation. A black SUV melted into the parking lot's shade, its engine a low growl. I stood staring at the empty asphalt. In the lounge, I checked the photos. The orbs were there, soft, perching above the smoke, then vanishing in subsequent frames. I downloaded them to a flash drive, my hands shaking so badly I spilled coffee. The next morning, I called the number. A generic recording confirmed, "Weather balloon release at 5:20 p.m. Thank you." Over and out. No name, no follow-up. The night stretched long and quiet at Green's 24-hour mini-mart. My shift had been unremarkable. 12 customers total, mostly kids grabbing energy drinks and one late-night dog owner picking up biscuits. I'd sold 35 cigarettes and refilled the snack rack, all while an unfamiliar black sedan sat motionless under the street lamp. Something felt off. Scout, the store cat, had retreated behind the chips, her tail curled tightly around her body. The hairs on my neck were standing on end. Outside, no lights moved except the single overhead bulb, ticking like a slow clock. At 1:17 a.m., the soda cooler buzzed and flickered for 2 seconds. The power surge was minimal, just enough to dim the fluorescent lights while the coffee machine kept running. I assumed it was just the store's wiring and went to reset the breaker in the back room. The aisle-free breaker had tripped, which I quickly flipped back. By 2:45 a.m., a cold, clear drip started landing on the concrete floor near the back door. I grabbed a mop and bucket to investigate the leak. The sedan remained perfectly still, its polished body broad and low to the ground. No headlights, engine barely audible. I'd seen plenty of overnight visitors, drunk drivers, college kids, random ghosts, but never someone who just sat, unmoving for hours. At 11:02 p.m., I'd heard the door chime but saw no one enter. Just empty double doors and the dull hum of the neon sign. I keep a flash drive hidden in my console, filled with photos showing 6 amber circles glowing in the darkness. I tell myself they're weather balloons. If I repeat it enough, maybe I'll believe it. No one at the club knows. No pilot I know flies near that fire district after dark. I was working the night shift, and everything seemed normal until the drip started. I traced it to an air duct, inspecting it carefully. No condensation, no dropped pipe. After 5 minutes, the drip slowed and then stopped completely. I emptied the bucket outside, noticing the lot was empty and the sedan was gone. Maybe the driver had stopped nodding off. The air now carried a musty smell, like wet carpet. Back inside, Scout the dog rushed out from under the counter, rubbing against my leg. The drip hadn't disturbed anyone. I checked the restrooms. Dry. Shrugging it off, I grabbed a coffee. By 3:30, the store had fallen quiet. The bug zapper over the door sizzled twice, and a chill cut through the space, despite the AC being set to cool. I pulled my hoodie tighter, shivering. Then I saw it, the sedan rolling forward 3 feet. No driver visible, no silhouette in the window. The passenger door opened by itself, then closed, and the car rolled back as if guided by invisible tracks. Unnerved, I walked to the front doors and shined my flashlight at the vehicle. Empty, no movement, engine off. The thick tires blocked any potential sound of restart. Back at the counter, I rubbed my eyes and stared at the security monitors. The cameras didn't cover the parking lot well, missing the driver's seat entirely. I hit the back lot view button, trying to pan the camera, but the feed cut to static for 4 seconds before returning to normal. The black sedan remained frozen in pixelated grey. I watched until the static cleared, then pressed record. The feed continued without glitches. Around 4:50, a young woman buying trail mix came in. I replied, "No, just an old car." She nodded and left. When the doors closed, I checked again. The sedan's roof was now empty. At 5:30 in the break room, I opened the refrigerator to find my sandwich gone. Turkey and cheese vanished without a trace. No note, no wrapper. I wondered if the night janitor had come early, but I'd heard no one. My shift ended at 6 a.m., the sky already turning grey. I rang up 2 more customers buying lottery tickets and beef jerky. At 6:02, I hit the door open button. The chime sounded and I grabbed my jacket, walking out to the lot, expecting to see the sedan. But the lot was empty. The sun was slipping below the jagged horizon as I rounded the last bend toward the radar station. Late July evening, warm and sticky, the kind of heat that clings even after the engine's off. My Toyota rolled along a gravel cutoff, windows down, a sweating can of cheap iced tea in the cup holder. The radio crackled with static, matching the whine of tires on asphalt. Highway 89 had been a crawl all day, and I needed to stretch my legs before the long drive home. The road wound past the radar site Echo, those big white domes you see in pictures of secret bases. But up close, it was just abandoned admin buildings and a lone guard shack. Nobody ever seemed to be around. As I slowed for a sharp corner, my headlights swept the hillside and caught something. A flash of silver, thin and elongated like a metal shard skimming the sky. It darted east to west, faster than any jet. No roar, no contrail, just a silent streak of movement. The parking lot was empty. No car, no footprints in the gravel, no oil spots. I checked the side door exit, locked, with no signs of tampering. My phone buzzed. A text from the manager, "Leave the key under the mat tonight. Maintenance at 10 o'clock. I hadn't mentioned anything about the fridge or the car, I replied. Got it. Walking to my car, keys in hand, I stopped. A black SUV idled in front of the convenience store across the road. A man in a black suit sat behind the wheel, jacket buttoned, tie narrow, hands flat against the steering wheel. He stared, unblinking. My pulse spiked. I raised a hand in greeting. He opened the door and stepped onto the street without a sound. As I moved closer, keeping my jacket zipped, he spoke. "You won't remember this conversation." His voice was low but clear. He pressed a small card into my palm, white, blank, with a single line of type in the corner. "Do not recall." I blinked. He stepped back, got into the SUV, and drove away without headlights, tires rolling silent on asphalt. Standing there, I looked down. The card was gone. My hand was empty. Across the road, the store's doors were closed, lights still on inside. I got into my car, locked the doors, and drove away without looking back. A quick streak of molten metal sliced through the twilight. My brakes screeched, and the car fishtailed in the loose gravel. Stepping out of the truck, heat enveloped me first, then an eerie silence. I set my iced tea on the roof, wiped sweat from my neck, and scanned the sky, just darkening blue and a single star hovering over the dome. My phone's flashlight cut through the night, illuminating the hill. Trees stood motionless, and the radar dome glowed lifeless in my headlights. 15 seconds passed. Maybe I'd imagined it all. Then, a crunch behind me. I whirled around. A black SUV sat square in the middle of the road, impossibly large. Engine running, windows up, no lights. I hadn't seen it arrive. The bushes blocked my view. For a moment, I thought the vehicle was empty. Then the passenger door opened. A tall, lean man emerged, dark hair slicked back, dressed in a crisp black suit with a narrow tie. No badge, no name tag, no hat. Hands in pockets. No flashlight. Just standing, watching me, face calm. I swallowed hard. "Did you see something up there?" I pointed skyward. He tilted his head toward the hillside. "You shouldn't be here," he said softly. "This road doesn't go anywhere. Keep driving." I frowned. There's nothing past that dome except a dead end and a drop-off toward the river. What road goes somewhere? He took a step forward. "None that matters. Move along." My gaze drifted past him to the darkness beyond the dome. Thick woods. Steep slope. No trail. My throat tightened. I saw something up there. A silver object. I insisted gently. He shook his head, eyes locked on mine. Seemingly answering an unseen presence, he repeated, "Just drive." My chest throbbed. I looked back at the hill. Nothing. No object, no glare, no movement, only the white dome and tree line. When I turned back, he stood half in shadow, half in the SUV's faint glow. A hint of a smile almost formed, but never reached his eyes. Am I in the wrong place? My voice sounded small, echoing on the empty road. He nodded slowly, deliberately, and slipped a folded card into my hand. "Why 89 North? No detours." I looked down at the card, questions swirling in my mind. I slid into the driver's seat, my hands trembling on the wheel. The SUV was right behind me, door closed, engine running, tail lights glowing a dim red. His flashlight was plain white with typed text, "Keep moving, no stops. Watch the sky." I swallowed the card and didn't lock the door. The SUV backed up 3 feet and stopped. As I crept forward, it followed directly behind. I wanted to pull out my phone, take a picture, keep some proof, but my hands shook too much to find the button. At the T intersection, I turned north onto the main road. Every glance in the rearview mirror showed the same dark lenses staring ahead, the SUV always just close enough to see. About half a mile later, I hit smooth pavement and pressed the accelerator. Suddenly, the SUV vanished. No fading headlights, no mirror reflection, nothing. I kept driving north until highway lights broke through pine shadows. The night air shifted, the radio crackled back to life with an old country song. I pulled over at the next gas station, heart racing. Checking the back seat, I found it empty. No card, no trace of my mysterious passenger. The passenger door was closed, seatbelt untouched. I filled the tank, bought a soda, and finally looked at my phone. No missed calls. No messages except a low battery warning. No photos in the gallery, no GPS record of the cutoff. The weather app showed clear skies, no moons visible until after midnight. I drove home in silence, trying to make sense of it all. Silver dart, empty hillside. Black SUV, that card with its cryptic message, "Watch the sky." Every stray headlight beam against the treetops made me jerk the wheel. In the garage, I sat in darkness for a long minute. I cracked the card between my fingers. The paper was smooth, pressed, the ink still cool. Under the kitchen's overhead light, I set it on the counter and made coffee. Through the window, the driveway's asphalt split into shadow and yellow light. The sky over the ridge looked empty. I pressed my forehead against the glass, listening for engines or footsteps, anything to signal his return. Only the refrigerator's hum and a distant dog bark broke the silence. I don't take that route anymore. Not if I can help it. Every so often I glance at the sky, half expecting to see that flash of silver, that fearful streak. When I close my eyes, I hear gravel shifting behind me just for a moment, like someone stepping out of the darkness and telling me to keep driving. Last night, I tried to look up an alternate route on the GPS, but it kept rerouting me back to that cutoff. So, I take the longer road, bumping through a few more miles of forest. Early May, I was out fishing around 6 in the morning. The water was calm, no wind. I'd anchored the boat off an old jetty about a quarter mile from shore, hoping to catch some halibut. The sun was low, and the sea looked glassy. I raised my polarized sunglasses and leaned over the side. Just below the surface, a shimmer caught my eye. A perfect disk, maybe 2 feet across, hovering 10 feet below me. It gleamed like nickel, edges blurred like light through water. My rod dipped in the holder and rattled with each small wave. I grabbed the camera, switched to dive mode, and took a shot through the green-blue blur. The disc remained still, not moving, not spinning, just hanging in place. No fish, no bubbles, no sign of a rope or weight holding it up. I leaned closer, breathing through the tube of my ragged hoodie, heart jumping. Then it vanished. No ripples, no sound, just water again. I sat back hard and tugged at the oars. I sculled to shore, abandoning fishing for the morning. Back home, I downloaded the photo. On the screen, a pale, grainy circle appeared in the mercurial water, only the faintest outline visible. Everything else below the surface looked normal. Seaweed drifting, sun rays cracking through. I stared until my coffee went cold. That afternoon, I told my neighbor Jules, a marine biologist. She suggested I might have seen a sunken buoy or diving gear. We walked the jetty together at dusk, but the water was dark, reflecting only street lamplights. No disc in sight. Over the next 2 days, I kept scanning the bay from my porch. My dreams filled with metal shapes drifting in deep water. I'd wake at odd hours, thinking I heard something scrape the hull. On the third morning, 2 men showed up at my door around 8:15. I was in my bathrobe, clutching a mug. 2 men stood before me, one tall and slim, the other shorter and stocky. Both wore black, the tall one in a fedora and suit with shiny shoes, the shorter in a baseball cap, jacket, and jeans. Their pale faces studied me intently, unblinking. "Can I asked. The tall man spoke, his voice low and polite. "Are you Mr. Kendricks?" I nodded. "That's me." He received a plain manila folder from his companion and opened it, showing me blurry photographs. The images were familiar, pale discs under dark water, identical to the ones I'd captured. My own photo looked smudged, as if someone had run a brush across its surface. "These are from your camera," he stated. I felt a sudden heat rise. Yes, that was mine. His message was clear. These images were to be considered equipment errors. "We suggest you remove them and not speak of this further," he said. When I asked why, he simply responded that it was best kept private. "You want me to delete the photos?" I asked. He nodded. "Delete them. It will be easier on your conscience." The stocky man leaned forward. "Forget what you saw," he added softly but firmly. Their attire was deliberate. The tall man's fedora casting a perfect shadow over his eyes, the shorter man's cap hiding half his brow. They handed back the folder, turned, and walked to a matte black truck with no markings. The tall man tipped his hat, said thank you, and they drove away without headlights. Minutes passed. My heart pounded so loudly I thought it might wake the neighborhood. Eventually, I went inside, locked the door, and turned on every light. I found the disk photo on my laptop, dragged it to the trash, and hit delete. Later that day, I returned to the jetty. Same spot, same light, same calm water. Nothing shimmered beneath, just seagrass, flat waters, and lazy cloud shadows. I lowered my camera, closed my eyes, breathed in the salt air, and tried to push the encounter from my mind. The bay looks normal, empty, like nothing ever happened. I wonder if I imagine it all or if something down there waits for me to look again. I keep replaying how the men in black looked at me as if they were cataloguing what I could remember. Maybe they're right and it was a camera glitch or a trick of water, but sometimes late at night, I dream of that perfect circle hovering in the sea, and I wake up reaching for the photos I trashed. I sleep with my window shut tight now and drive past the old jetty on my way to work without slowing down. The urge to check the horizon for a glint of metal haunts me. I haven't told anyone else. Not my wife, not Jules, not even the fishing forum. My name's Derek Chavez. I drive a cab for East Side Taxis. Just after midnight, I rolled up to the corner of 5th and Madison, idling under the streetlight. Rain from earlier had slicked the pavement and steam curled off manhole covers. I was wrapping up what I thought would be my last shift before the weekend. A black sedan pulled in behind me, door opened, and 2 men in dark suits climbed into the back seat without a word. They shut the door so quietly I hardly heard the click. I glanced in the rear view. Both wore white shirts, skinny black ties, polished shoes and sunglasses, even in the wet dark. One was tall and lean, the other shorter and square-shouldered. Neither gave me a destination. I tapped the meter and said, "Where to, gentlemen?" The tall one leaned forward. No accent I could place. No destination, he's just drive. I nodded, leaned back. Anything come up on the meter? Drive was all he said. I pulled away and took Madison north toward the freeway. After a minute, I checked the fare display. $420 S and climbing. I glanced at the rear view. No expression, no phone, just two dark shapes in black suits. I asked roundabout on Maple. The short one turned his head slightly and followed directions. He reached into his jacket pocket, hauled out a small slip of paper, and handed it to me blind. No writing facing me, just tiny water spots from the cab's humidity. I folded it into the console. I tried to read it, but couldn't make out letters in the low light. "Okay," I said. "Maple roundabout." "Then what?" He didn't answer. The tall one cleared his throat, tapped the back of my seat. His jacket shifted, revealing a silver clip. No gun handle, just a metal rectangle. "Begin." I drifted through the city's quiet neighborhoods, past neon signs and shuttered storefronts. The meter climbed steadily. $50, then $70. My head throbbed as I glanced at my watch. 2:15 a.m., though I could have sworn it was only 12:30 moments ago. "Keep driving," said the short man, his voice flat. I pressed the radio, finding only static. The city channel offered nothing but hiss. With cell service spotty, I cracked the window, listening for engines or sirens. Just a distant hum and the occasional passing car broke the silence. Following 3 simple arrows on a slip, left, right, left, I navigated without street names. At 307, I turned onto a one-way street, crossing the river into the industrial district. Orange street lamps flickered weakly, casting uncertain shadows. Another arrow pointed back downtown, and I pressed the gas, watching the skyline drift past, neon signs reflecting on wet asphalt. By 4 a.m., I was near the old freight yard. Rusty rails and dark warehouses surrounded me as I looped a block lined with chain-link fences. The meter now read $142.50, my hands trembling on the wheel. An unspoken tension filled the cab, heavy and suffocating. At 4202, a lone street lamp illuminated a crumpled paper taped to a stop sign. The shorter man leaned forward, pointing silently. I slowed, then stopped. "Exit here," the paper read. I followed an alley under a broken chain, past a shuttered auto shop, emerging onto the bridge. When the arrow pointed straight ahead, the tall one opened the door himself. Both men stepped onto the slick sidewalk, first freight, then the short one, and merged into the night at the bright yellow bus shelter. I sat heart-pounding for half a minute. Stepping out, I closed the door gently and retrieved the slip from the console. Blank. No ink, no letters. The meter flashed fare courtesy of Agent S before resetting to 0. My head spun as I locked the doors and sat sipping lukewarm coffee, checking my phone's 2 missed calls. From dispatch, a single voicemail broke the silence. Circles and confusion marked my hours of driving. The message demanded my report. My lips stung as I hit call back, connecting to an unknown number. No ring, just a click. A female voice, low and calm, said nothing about the previous night's ride. My stutter echoed. "Who is this?" Silence answered. Then silence ended. The cab sat empty as rain drummed on its roof. I stepped out, locked the doors, and walked under the bridge to the bus stop. My headlamp flickered to life, cutting through the darkness. The yellow shelter stood empty, no suits, no footprints marking the wet ground. Home came at 5:03 a.m. The meter card in my pocket showed 0 charge. The mysterious number vanished from my phone's call log. I set the kettle to boil, watching rain smear the window until dawn broke. 2 hours later, I left for work. Locked door. Checked for followers. Dispatch heard nothing from me. Who paid for that ride? Why the endless loops? The slip of paper remained blank, tucked away. Sometimes, when light hit it just right, faint arrow outlines seemed to whisper. I'd slide it back into my wallet, keep walking, hoping never to receive that call again. Sunrise revealed the first clue. Driving the crew truck down County Road 42, headlights caught something strange. A perfect dark circle, 2 feet across, centered in the right lane. Unlike the surrounding asphalt, this spot looked baked, as if a blowtorch had melted the surface until it bubbled. No cracks, just a hard-edged charcoal patch. I parked between cones, hard hat and flashlight in hand. The air carried an odd scent, burning rubber mixed with ozone. Crouching, I shined light across the smooth, almost glassy surface. A gloved finger traced the sharp, unchipped edge. Tapping the center produced a hollow sound, like striking a lid. A shiver ran through me, wondering what could create such a mark. I clipped the radio mic. Base to crew, something odd on County 42, mile 5.7. Everyone was marking potholes on Route 99. I picked up a rock, flicked it against the circle's edge, waiting. I spotted the mark on the pavement and dropped my phone, pounding my fist in frustration. The surface remained unscathed. Snapping a photo, I noticed the autofocus struggling to capture the image, a perfect black ring against the grey asphalt. The morning sun painted the cottonwoods orange as my watch read 6:12 a.m. Dispatch informed me crews were still mobilizing and wouldn't arrive for another hour. Shrugging, I drove south to grab coffee. The two-lane road, a ribbon cutting through empty farmland. Corn stalks swayed in a light breeze, and an unsettling feeling crept over me, like someone was watching from the fields. At the Ibis Diner, I ordered black coffee and a sausage biscuit. Maria, the waitress, listened intently when I described the mark. Her brother had seen something similar in a crop circle near Tiller's Mill the previous night, a blue glow that faded away. We exchanged concerned looks, noting the similar characteristics, perfect geometry, and no clear explanation. Around 7:30, the crew finally arrived. Ahmed and Lena carried shovels and metal detectors. We methodically examined the site, marking the area with cones. Ahmed's detector remained silent, and Lena's trowel revealed only dust. We dug a foot down, finding solid earth with no hidden devices. The circle stubbornly clung to the asphalt. We logged it as an unidentified pavement anomaly, marking the corners with alternating red and yellow spray paint. Something felt off. Later, while getting water and cigarettes, I stood beneath a power pole, smoking and studying the burn mark. A lone helicopter swept the county line, passing north to south 3 times without a banner. Its distant rotor noise raised more questions. By mid-morning, a county representative arrived in a black sedan, sharp suit, grey hair and sunglasses, despite the overcast sky. He approached with a badge, C. Langford, Special Investigator. Our conversation was brief and cryptic. When I explained finding the mark in our unsuccessful investigation, he simply nodded, murmuring, "Interesting," before pulling out a small booklet, from his jacket and scribbled a note. Radiation. Heat anomalies. Any unusual readings? He tapped the notebook. "Nope," I said. No gear response. Thermal camera was normal, just looks burned. Smells weird. No tracks or anything. He surveyed the ground, squatted, and ran a gloved hand over the surface, careful not to touch the center. Then he stood and snapped the notebook shut. "We'll need to keep this off the record." He looked me in the eye. No reports, no photos beyond initial intake. I felt a pinch in my gut. "You want me to delete the pictures?" He tapped the sunglasses. "Just hold them. If anyone asks, you never found anything. You patched it and moved on." I shook my head. "I can't do that. County policy. Any safety hazard gets logged." He straightened and brushed dust off his suit. "This isn't policy. It's an order." He paused. "You'll understand later." He reached into his coat, pulled a card, slid it across the hood. "Here's my contact. If anyone asks about District 7 anomalies, you tell them you referred it to me." He tapped the card again. "Cappy?" I looked at the card. No agency name, just a phone number and a name. C. Langford. No title, no logo. I slid it to my jacket pocket. He nodded, got into the black sedan, and left without looking back. I stood by the circle. Crickets sounded in the grass, distant engines on the highway. Lena and Ahmed watched from the cab, brows furrowed. I waved them over and told them to cover the hole with cold mix. "Smooth it out." No mention of the circle. Ahmed hesitated, but I shook my head. Company policy. If the boss says cover it, cover it. We tried black asphalt over the mark until it blended with the pavement. I ran the roller over it twice, then packed up. On the drive home, the county card burned a hole in my pocket. I stared at the number. Outside Ebis, I saw the helicopter again. Same pattern. It passed overhead, rotor blades slicing grey sky into shadow. I felt fingers of dread trace my spine. I got home around noon. Rain starting dripping off my jacket. I threw my keys on the table, stripped off work boots, showered. In the bathroom mirror, I looked tired, dark circles, pale skin. I dried off, dressed, then sat at the kitchen table with my phone. I stared at the card. C. Langford, Special Investigator. So special, no one else knows him. I considered calling the number, but my finger hovered. I poured, coffee black like this morning. A sausage biscuit, cold and forgotten, sat on the counter. Rain pelted the window, its rhythm matching my heartbeat. A car pulled into the drive. Miss Carter knocked. Soaked through, she asked about the highway crew. I mentioned a routine patch, forcing a casual laugh. Her son had seen strange lights at dawn, glowing cracks that vanished as quickly as they appeared. She nodded, smiled, and left. The door closed behind her. My heart raced. I stared at the dark rectangle of patch in the driveway. My hand traced the repair sheet of metal. A manila card lay nearby. Rain drummed outside, casting flickering neon shapes across the wet windowsill. I sipped my coffee until it went cold, eyes fixed on the card. Langford remained uncalled. The photo stayed undeleted. I sat listening to the rain, feeling the pavement watching me. That summer, I worked as a park ranger at Cedar Hollow State Park. Quiet place. Mostly hikers and families during the day, just me and the wildlife at night. Thick with pine and oak, the park had one area near the north end I'd check regularly. About a week before July's end, I was doing a slow ATV loop down the fire road when something caught my eye. A perfect circle in the forest. Too perfect. I know natural clearings, and this wasn't one. 40 feet across, every tree inside dead and brittle, grey as ash. No burn marks, just scorched trees. The grass yellowed and dry like nothing could grow. Surrounding trees looked healthy. No disease, no bugs. Just this dead zone. I parked and approached. The air felt heavy, sticky. Crouching, I poked the grass with a stick. It snapped easily, carrying a faint chemical smell. Something wasn't right. The trees were dead when I first found the patch. Something seemed off, but I couldn't pinpoint exactly what was wrong. I radioed the main office to report my discovery, starting to explain the situation when suddenly the radio crackled strangely and went silent. I checked the battery and antenna. Everything looked normal, but no signal came through. I chalked it up to potential interference from the surrounding trees and decided to head back to the ranger station to log my findings. Late afternoon was settling in around 5 p.m., with thick clouds rolling overhead and the first drops of rain beginning to fall. When I arrived, the station was quiet, just the low hum of the refrigerator and soft country music playing in the background. Later that evening, I sat by the window overlooking the fire road. The rain had stopped, but dark, heavy clouds still hung low in the sky. Just after 9 p.m., headlights appeared, slowly moving down the road. 2 cars passed the station, but one pulled off near the area with the dead trees. Using my binoculars, I watched 2 men emerge from a dark sedan. They wore black suits, neat and unwrinkled, despite the wet weather. No rain gear, no equipment. They simply stood at the edge of the woods, facing the dead patch with an unsettling stillness. These weren't typical forestry or park service workers. No badges, no radios, just immaculate suits and an eerie presence. I wanted to approach them to ask what they were doing, but my radio remained dead. For about 20 minutes, they stood motionless, then quietly got back in their car. They never once looked toward the station or acknowledged my presence. The car backed slowly down the road and vanished into the darkness. I waited, half expecting them to return, but the road remained empty for the rest of the night. The next day, I revisited the patch, hoping for some change or missed detail. Nothing had altered. The circular area of dead trees remained exactly the same. No new tracks, no signs of disturbance. I carefully examined the soil but found no concrete evidence, no burns, no identifiable chemicals, just a perfectly contained circle of dead trees. When I mentioned the mysterious men to my supervisor, he dismissed my concerns without a second thought. The missile launch was just before dawn at the test range south of White Sands. Thick, grey clouds hung low, tinting the rising sun. I'm Mayor Jensen, a freelance aerospace journalist who'd been tracking missile launches for 2 years. I'd driven out the night before and camped in my car by the observation bunker, waiting for the scheduled test. At 6:02 a.m., the alert horn sounded. I raised my DSLR and framed the pad through the bunker's slit window. A bright flash erupted, and the missile's contrail sliced through the clouds like a white ribbon. Jet noise filled the air, shifting from a deep roar to a distant whine as it climbed out of sight. I snapped a dozen shots, lowering the camera only when the sound faded. That's when I saw it. A lone figure stood backlit by floodlights near the service road, positioned by the chain-link fence. Shoulders squared at attention, head slightly tilted forward. No safety gear, just a dark suit stark against the grey morning. I zoomed in with my lens. The figure remained motionless. Grabbing my camera, I ducked under the window and headed out. By the time I reached the fence, the test crew had retreated to their vehicles. The road was empty, just gravel and stray parachute hardware ribbons. The figure should have been there, but it wasn't. I circled the perimeter, peered through glare tape and checked every shadowy corner. Nothing. No footprints, no crushed grass, no trace of anyone. My heart racing, I tapped my radio. Range control. This is Jensen. Do you have an observer at the Silence. I started walking back to the bunker when a soft click sounded behind me. I spun around. Months later, those strange moments still haunt me. Maybe it was a government forestry operation or a weather anomaly. The radio started working again the next morning, but I remained cautious. They never returned. Every time I drove past that area after dark, an eerie feeling crept over me. Something seemed to be waiting just beyond the tree line, quiet, patient. The dead trees remain unchanged. The circle persists. I can't explain what I witnessed or why those men were there. It's as if the forest held a secret, and they were the only ones who knew. In a black suit, white shirt, narrow black tie, shoes impossibly shiny against the gravel, perfectly positioned, as if he'd been carefully arranged. My feet wouldn't move. A small wave, and then he spoke. Ma'am, clipped, calm. This area is off limits. My press badge went up. Defense Tech Weekly, I explained. Photography permission. He shook his head. Revoked. A step closer. Return to the bunker, please. His face was strange. No expression, yet not unfriendly. I glanced at the bunker clock. 6:15. 10 minutes searching for that first figure felt like hours. Sir, I asked, did you see someone earlier? Dark suit standing at the fence. Half a plea in my voice. He cocked his head. No. Checked his watch. A step away from the fence. I raised my camera. A quote about why I'm being escorted. Record button pressed. A faint smile, barely a tilt of the mouth. Then another headshake. No area is secured. He sighed, as if this task pained him. Will you comply? The hair on my arms prickled, fingers hovering over the shutter. I didn't want to back down, but I stepped away. Camera lowering. He nodded, turned and glided, not walked, into shadows behind the service road. No shoe crunches, just silence. I watched until he vanished. Back to the bunker. Mind buzzing, camera dangling. The test crew gone. Vans pulled off the road. Bunker door locked, empty. I waited until 7 a.m., then drove to the main gate. The security guard looked bewildered. I flashed my pass. Range closure, he said. Missed the memo. I insisted no memo existed. He shrugged, punched the gate code. You shouldn't have been here. Highway stretching ahead. I checked the photos. Missile blasts, perfect. Bright arcs through cloud cover. But the fence line shots, a dark blur in the corner, a standing figure, then gone. Zooming in revealed fabric-like edges, no details. Next frame, nothing. 8:15. I called my editor, voice cracking while describing the man in black, the flood lamp encounter. She mentioned tight security for hypersonic tests, potential photo scrubbing. Something felt off. Very off. I was working the graveyard shift at the Green Ridge gas station, that little place just off Highway 89 where nobody really stops unless they're passing through or desperate. Early September, just after midnight, and the night had been slow. Cars trickling in and out every now and then, mostly truckers or folks heading home from late shifts. The kind of night where the fluorescent lights buzz just loud enough to remind you you're the only one awake. Around 12:45, a beat-up silver sedan rolled up to pump 3. The driver's window was down and the inside light clicked on when the driver popped it open. I was stacking energy drinks by the cooler and glanced up just as the car door shut. In the rearview mirror of the sedan, I saw something odd, a dark round shape hovering low over the far side of the parking lot near the trees lining the edge, about the size of a small car, but the edges were fuzzy, like it was shimmering, or out of focus. It wasn't making any noise and there were no lights on it, just this weird flat disc shape kind of floating a foot above the ground. I blinked and looked back out toward where I'd seen it. The car was still there, engine idling, but the driver's seat was empty. I rubbed my eyes. I thought maybe the driver stepped out for a smoke or something. I called out, "Hey, you okay?" Nothing. No answer. I walked around to the passenger side and looked inside. No one. The door was locked. Later, I found myself at a diner half a mile off base, spooning coffee. My camera bag rested on the seat beside me. I stared at the windows, expecting to see him in black standing there, but nothing, just highway and scrub pines. She had told me to run the launch pics and file a rest under shelf stock. I left my card with the waitress and walked to my car. In the passenger seat lay a sealed manila envelope, stamp date 612, no return address. Inside, 2 prints of my photos cropped close to the fence line and a single slip of paper. No further inquiry. I folded it, tucked it back in the glove box and drove home, feeling like I'd just woken from a half-remembered dream. The highway stretched on, yellow lines fading into dawn. and I kept thinking I'd see that dark figure in my rear view, perfect posture, black suit, unblinking eyes. I didn't. I just kept driving until the city lights rose ahead. I stepped outside briefly, scanning the empty parking lot and surrounding trees. The weird disc thing had vanished without a trace. I double-checked the rearview mirror. Nothing there. A hollow silence settled around me, making my skin prickle. Back inside, I tried calling the local sheriff, but the store phone was dead. The radio was silent too. It wasn't unusual for the place to have poor signal. But something felt off tonight. I couldn't even send a text. When I turned around, the sedan had completely disappeared. No headlights, no sign it had ever been there. About 10 minutes later, the door's bell rang. A man in a dark suit and perfectly slicked back hair stood before me. His pale, expressionless face seemed out of place in the dusty gas station, like he'd stepped straight out of an old black and white film. "Good evening," he said in a flat, calm voice. He launched into questions about recent strange occurrences, lights, sounds, anything unusual. I nervously explained about the car and the disc-like shape I'd seen near the trees. He listened without any visible reaction, just nodding and taking notes in a small notebook. "Did you take any pictures?" he asked. I shook my head, admitting I was too confused at the moment. The man's smile didn't reach his eyes as he advised me to keep quiet. "People misunderstand things they don't often see," he said, specifically mentioning not to tell the sheriff. His final words hung in the air as he prepared to leave. "We're watching, but we don't want to cause alarm." I felt paralyzed, my gut screaming to call someone, but something kept me silent. As he walked out, that overwhelming sense of unease remained, leaving me uncertain about what had just happened. I hit the trail at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the sun beating down on the high desert outside Cedar Flats. "My name's Alex Morales, and I'd come out to clear my head." No cell signal, just the old missile silo they decommissioned in the 70s, sitting halfway up the slope of Bald Mountain. The trail was dusty and overgrown, but I'd printed a topo map the night before, so I figured I'd find it easy enough. By 4:30, I'd topped out at the crater's rim. The silo hulked there, half buried, concrete walls cracked and stained. I dropped my pack and walked around the perimeter, eyes wide for snakes. Instead, I saw patches of metal jutting from the rubble. Steel panels, rusted bolts, sections of corrugated plating. I pulled out my camera to snap pictures of the peeling chrome finish. That's when things got strange. I looked at one panel and saw not my camera's reflection, but a flash of movement behind me. Something bright, almost white, sliding across the metal like liquid. I spun around. Nothing. Just the sky and heat waves dancing over scrub brush. When I looked back at the panel, the glint was gone, replaced by dull rust. I crouched and shined my flashlight on the surface. Scratches covered the metal, dense and confusing. My breath caught in my throat. The angle of the metal couldn't catch the sun that way. I set the flashlight aside and circled the silo, peering into every recess. Between two wall segments, a narrow gap beckoned, wide enough to squeeze into. Later, at work, I couldn't shake the memory. A man in a suit had approached me, his message clear: "Do not interfere unless necessary." Then he was gone. I sat behind the counter for the next hour, heart pounding, eyes flicking to the windows every few seconds. The night stayed quiet, too quiet. When the morning shift arrived, I handed over my keys without a word. I didn't want to sound crazy. For the next few days, I kept checking the parking lot. No strange cars, no hovering discs. But sometimes when it was dark, I'd catch a flash of something in the rear-view mirror near the lot's edge by the trees. Always gone when I looked directly. I didn't tell anyone else. It felt like one of those things you just don't talk about, especially after a suited stranger tells you to keep quiet. The weird part is, I'm still not sure if I saw what I think I saw. Maybe the driver was playing a prank, but that didn't explain the empty car, the shape in the mirror, or the silence that followed. Sometimes I wonder if they're still watching. I crawled through the narrow opening, pushing my pack ahead of me. The interior was cavernous and eerie old cables hung like dead vines, and murky water pooled at my feet. When I swept my light across the space, something caught my eye. Ice blue reflections dancing on the far wall. 10 or 15 pin-pricks of light flickered, as if someone had scattered flashlights behind the concrete ribs. As quickly as they appeared, the reflections vanished. My heart raced. I sat up, feeling the cold walls against my skin. The entry hole was unnaturally smooth, almost polished. Shivering, I clambered back out, brush snagging my shirt. The sun was sinking lower. I set up camp at the ridge's edge tent, sleeping bag, stove. Ramen boiled while I stared back at the silo. Its metal gleamed a fading copper in the sunset, with no trace of the earlier mysterious lights. I dismissed the experience as a trick of light and settled into my sleeping bag. Midnight brought a strange, low hum, different from any engine, more like air moving through a distant vent. Crickets chirped in the surrounding scrub as an unsettling silence descended. I emerged from the tent and scanned the starless sky. My headlamp revealed the silo's crater mouth, dark and foreboding. The dome's top, where a vent cap once sat, briefly glowed a pale green before extinguishing. Doubt crept in. Was I imagining things? I lay awake until dawn, straining to hear that mysterious hum, feeling watched by an unseen presence. At sunrise, I packed up and hiked toward Elkridge Ranger Station 6 miles below. My legs ached, but the strange silo reflections replayed in my mind. Dusty and dehydrated, I finally reached the station. Ranger Connolly, a woman in her 60s with sun-weathered skin, listened as I described my journey. When I mentioned the odd lights near the silo, she tilted her head, assessing my story. She hadn't heard similar reports. Just then, the door chimed. A man in a crisp charcoal grey suit stood in the doorway. No ranger insignia, just an immaculately pressed jacket and polished shoes. He carried a white envelope, sealed and official-looking. Ranger Connolly's desk was quiet when the red-waxed envelope arrived, bearing a single letter R. She lifted an eyebrow as he set it down beside her clipboard. "Return to center," he said smoothly. "I believe this was misplaced." Nobody looked directly at anyone. The envelope waited, folded and expectant. "We don't have a mail drop here," she said. He responded simply, "Then I'm the mailman," and straightened himself. I spoke up, my voice small and tight. "I didn't leave anything here." For the first time he turned toward me. His face was calm, almost blank, dark eyes hidden behind thin-rimmed glasses, a beat of silence. Then, "Good day." He walked out without another sound. Ranger Connolly watched him go, then tucked the envelope into a filing cabinet. "He's new," she muttered, as if the formality still lingered on her tongue. She waved at me. "Drive safe, Alex." I nodded and left, feeling the envelope's empty weight in my mind. The dirt road stretched ahead, and every shadow in the trees seemed to watch me. Morning light brightened the sky, but something made me feel like noon would still feel like dusk. At my car, windows dusted over, I sat for a moment before driving. My mind replayed fragments, the bunker's scenes, midnight's blue-white flashes, a suited man slipping an envelope through a locked door. I passed Bald Mountain's turn-off without a glance, headlights low, waiting for something, anything to illuminate the horizon. Later that evening, I was parked at the Seal Cove overlook near Mendocino. A Sunday in late July, the air heavy with summer heat. I'd come to catch the last light, casually using my binoculars, nothing serious, just a habit. The ocean at dusk always feels different, quieter. The parking lot was nearly empty, just one camper van down the way. I had my thermos of tea, small binoculars ready, no expectations. Then it started, a shimmer. Not a flash, not moving, just hovering over the water, low, just above the horizon, like heat rising but different. The ocean was eerily still, a patch looking completely different from the surrounding water. I almost missed the shimmer because it blended perfectly into the haze. At first I thought it might be a distant fishing boat's light. But when I focused, something was off. The light didn't flicker like normal lights. Instead, it pulsed with a steady, rhythmic quality. Its shape was strange, folding into itself, then stretching out, then folding again. It looked like a bubble made of something heavier than air. For several minutes, it remained locked in place, its dull shimmer unchanged while the water beneath it stayed absolutely motionless. Suddenly, something dark passed in front of the shimmer. It wasn't a bird or plane. This thing had no clear edges and drifted across the light, disappeared, just as quickly as it appeared. I caught only a sense of immense depth, like something massive had momentarily blocked my view. I scanned the empty water for a boat or spotlight, but found nothing. My binoculars went weird right then. They weren't broken, they worked fine the next morning, but in that moment, they simply wouldn't focus on the shimmer. I could see the railing and my hands clearly, but whenever I pointed them toward the light, everything blurred completely. When I looked with my naked eyes, the shimmer was fainter, seeming to have moved further out. I sat there for about 10 more minutes. The light was fading, and that heavy silence before complete darkness had settled in. Just as I was putting my binoculars away, someone tapped on the window. I jumped. A man stood there, tall, pale, wearing a crisp black suit with a clean white shirt, no tie, late 40s, with no discernible expression. I hadn't heard a car or footsteps. One moment I was alone, the next he was right beside my window. When I rolled it down halfway, he leaned in slightly and said flatly, "That part of the sky isn't public." His voice was smooth but off, like someone reading lines in an unfamiliar language. I asked what he meant. "The spot west of San Luis Obispo, where I sometimes go to unwind, isn't really a beach. It's more of a gravel turnout with a clear ocean view. Locals know about it, but you won't find it on most maps." That night was warm, with a hazy sky that glowed softly after sunset, that strange light you get at the end of a hot day. I'd just finished my sandwich and was leaning over the steering wheel, scanning the water. A tanker ship sat in the distance, and a few gulls flew low. My dad's old Nikon binoculars were in the glove box, something I'd carried around for years without much thought. I was casually looking out when something caught my eye. Almost directly west, a strange shimmer appeared just above the water's surface. It didn't move at first, just a small patch, maybe a couple degrees off the horizon. It looked like a heat mirage, but something felt different. Then something happened that would change everything. A man suddenly appeared in my passenger seat. He didn't repeat himself, just said firmly, "Please don't use optical devices in restricted airspace." My hands shook slightly on the wheel as I tried to keep calm. I looked past him, expecting to see a vehicle behind me. Nothing. The camper van from earlier had vanished, and the entire lot was empty. I glanced back. He was walking away, heading toward the beach path, but not following it. Instead, he continued past toward the bluff's edge. No flashlight, no hesitation. He just kept walking until he disappeared from view. I waited, though I'm not sure why. Part of me expected him to return or say something more, but the path remained silent. Eventually, I drove home without even turning on the radio. Back in my apartment, I tested the binoculars. They were perfect, crystal clear. I pointed them at street signs down the block, and everything came into sharp focus. The next day, I returned to the same spot at the same time. The ocean looked identical, the breeze unchanged. I stayed for about an hour. No shimmer, no man, no van. But something was different. A new small metal sign bolted to the wooden rail read, "Sensitive Marine Surveillance Area. Do not loiter." I was certain it hadn't been there the night before. The shimmer caught my eye, unlike anything I'd seen before. It wasn't heat rising from hot pavement. This was different. The ocean couldn't create something like this. The air seemed stretched, almost cube-shaped, with an edge that flickered subtly in and out of existence. My binoculars stayed steady, but the shape defied focus. It was like my vision wanted to slide away, the edges bending slightly as I watched. No sound, no lights, just this strange patch distorting the air. The water beneath looked darker, more dense. I glanced away briefly, wiped my binocular lenses, and looked back. Still there. I stared, watching as daylight faded and the sun dropped completely. Even in darkness, the shimmer held an odd internal glow. Not bright, but just visible enough to confirm its presence. My phone was ready to capture the moment, but something stopped me. An inexplicable feeling suggested photographing it would alter something fundamental. I hesitated. Headlights appeared in my rearview mirror. Another car pulling into the lot wasn't unusual, but this black sedan approached with purpose. No meandering, no uncertainty. It knew exactly where to stop, parking just 5 feet behind me. No interior lights, no visible occupants. Moments later, both front doors opened simultaneously. 2 men emerged, identical in their appearance, black suits, crisp white shirts, narrow black ties, perfectly neat hair, and expressions as blank as fresh paper. They walked toward my window with practiced precision. The driver's side man tapped my window. I rolled it down halfway. No smile, no introduction. "That part of the sky isn't public," he stated, his voice flat and detached. When I asked what he meant, silence was his only response. His partner stood watching the road, seemingly waiting for something, or someone, that never arrived. The first man produced a thin manila folder, holding it just long enough for me to glimpse the bold black label. The night was quiet along Highway 24 in eastern Utah, a long stretch of open desert and red rock where nothing much happens. I was working night patrol near mile marker 219, parked at a gravel pull-off, watching for speeders, though they were rare past midnight. Just after 2 a.m., I looked at the clock, thinking about grabbing a sandwich from the cooler. That's when I saw it. Something was hovering near the ridge to the north. Not flying like a plane or moving like a drone, but just hanging there. A perfect black cube, maybe the size of a small car. No lights, no reflection. It didn't wobble or rotate, just sat motionless about 40 or 50 feet above the ridgeline. At first I thought it might be a perspective trick, maybe a tower or boulder catching strange light, but there was no moon, and the stars behind it had vanished. It blocked them completely. I stepped out of the cruiser and stood by the door. The wind was sharp, with only occasional gusts breaking the silence. I stared, trying to make sense of this thing. My first instinct was to call it in, but something made me hesitate. Later, I returned to the spot. The first time, a man showed me a document about restricted natural phenomena. He said nothing more, just told me to leave. I complied without argument. When I got home, I wrote down everything I'd seen and sketched the strange shimmer. I tried researching military zones, weather balloons, optical illusions, but nothing matched. The next evening I went back. I parked further down and sat with binoculars. The sky looked normal, the ocean calm. But a new sign was bolted to the railing. Brand new, plain metal with black print. Unauthorized. Observation prohibited. No photography or optical equipment beyond this point. 2 days later, the sign was gone. I watched a floating cube hanging motionless in the sky. Without warning, it began sliding smoothly to the left, moving maybe 5 or 6 miles an hour along the ridgeline. No lights, no sound, just this dark box gliding across the landscape. After covering about 100 yards, it stopped, seeming to observe something. I grabbed the radio and reported an unknown aerial object near mile marker 219, possibly a drone. Dispatch offered to contact air support, but I told them to wait. It wasn't breaking any laws, just existing. Through my windshield, I kept watching. For about 5 more minutes, nothing changed. Then the object started ascending slowly, climbing higher and higher, until it vanished completely. No blinking lights, no trail, just gone. Suddenly, headlights appeared behind me. I hadn't heard an engine or seen anything in my mirrors. One moment the road was empty. The next, a black sedan idled just 10 feet from my cruiser. No tags, no markings, windows completely blacked out. I stepped out, hand near my sidearm but not drawn, flashlight already on. I tried to shine it into the windshield, but the glass reflected cleanly, revealing nothing inside. 2 men emerged, identical black suits, white shirts, black ties. Something was off. Their movements were too precise, too synchronized. One stood about 6'2", Dotto, shorter and stockier. They didn't look like real agents, more like mannequins dressed up. Neither spoke. The taller one approached and held out a manila folder with a red, natural, PH no Mina stamp. It looked freshly printed. He handed it to me silently and stepped back. Inside was a single sheet with numbered instructions. Observed between 1-3 a.m., do not engage. No documentation, no photographs, no discussion with media or outside agencies. A blank line waited for an initial confirmation. The shorter man offered a pen. I didn't sign. I was working the Northwestern Rail Line route through the Cascades, a long haul with mostly quiet forest and mountain stretches. Most days were routine, checking tickets, announcing stops, keeping things on schedule. But one late October night, just after 9 p.m., something happened near Elk Ridge Station that I can't explain. The sky was mostly clear, a bit chilly, but not freezing. When they approached, I initially thought nothing of it. The tall one and his companion were unusual, but I didn't realize how strange things would get. They didn't answer when I asked who they were with. The tall one just looked at me, his voice eerily even. "The object is not your concern," he said. Something about how he spoke made my stomach turn, like he'd memorized the sentence perfectly, though English clearly wasn't his first language. I handed back the folder and demanded identification. His smile was mechanical, more an imitation of human expression than genuine emotion. The shorter man stared past me toward the ridge, repeating flatly, "You didn't see where it went." When I said I didn't follow, he repeated the exact same phrase. They returned to their sedan. No engine noise, no lights. The car rolled backward, executed a perfect 3-point turn, and glided into darkness, without headlights, moving like it knew the road better than I did. Back in my cruiser, I checked the dash cam. Recording showed nothing. No cube, no outline, just clean sky. The sedan wasn't visible at all. You could see me talking to someone off-screen, my door open, but no vehicle behind me. I sat there an hour, debating whether to report everything. Ultimately, I logged it as an unidentified aerial object with no interaction or pursuit. That was 6 weeks ago. I haven't seen the cube again, but twice since then, I've spotted the same sedan parked off-road near my shift change point. Same model, same dark class, never moving, always gone when I return. They act like I signed something, but I didn't. The train rumbled through a remote forest section where dense trees blocked any view beyond their thick trunks. Tall and unbroken, the forest stretched on either side of the tracks, creating an isolated corridor. That night felt different from the countless other times I'd traveled this route. As we rounded a slight bend near milepost 42, a pale beam of light caught my attention. It wasn't like any standard light source, no headlights, no flashlight. This was softer, almost ethereal, sweeping across the trees on the right side of the track with an unnatural smoothness. No sound accompanied it, just the train's steady clatter breaking the silence. I sat in the conductor's cabin near the front, sipping lukewarm coffee and watching the light move in a deliberate scanning motion. The beam cut through darkness with a muted glow that didn't reflect off the trees as normal light would. Leaning closer to the window, I tried to catch a glimpse of whatever was creating this strange illumination. Near the forest's edge, I caught a brief outline of something, a shadowy shape too tall to be human. I blinked, wondering if my tired eyes were playing tricks. The light continued its slow, steady arc, unwavering and mysterious. When I tried to radio the dispatcher, only static answered. The light eventually disappeared behind a ridge, but an unsettling sensation remained, like something was watching the train's progress. 20 minutes later, we pulled into Elkridge Station. The platform was empty, typical for this late hour. Just as I prepared for a routine stop, two men materialized at the far end. They wore identical black suits and ties, perfectly pressed despite the damp chill. No coats, no hats, just standing there, looking distinctly out of place. The train was quiet and still at Elkridge when they appeared. Two men, standing motionless without bags or signs of travelers. They weren't shivering despite the cold, which struck me as odd. I watched them walk slowly to the last car and board without tickets or conversation. This was unusual since boarding was supposed to be closed. I thought about radioing the conductor, but the dispatcher remained silent. My watch showed about 40 minutes until the next scheduled stop. As the train moved, I spotted them sitting side by side in the back of the last car. They were completely still, not interacting with anyone. The other passengers seemed to look right through them, as if they weren't even present. At Firgrove, I grabbed my ticket puncher and walked to the rear car. But when I arrived, the men had vanished. No trace on the platform or in the station. I asked other passengers if they'd seen them exit, but nobody had noticed anything. Some just shrugged, seemingly uninterested. A strange heaviness settled in my chest. I reported this to the station master, who gave me an enigmatic look and quickly changed the subject. The rest of the trip felt normal, but my mind kept returning to those men and the peculiar light beam sweeping the forest. In the following days, I investigated. Other conductors reported nothing similar. Dispatch offered no explanation. Maintenance crews at Elkridge confirmed no night work for weeks. The more I pondered, the more unsettling the details became. Their sudden appearance, the radio silence, the unexplained light. During daylight, I returned to Elkridge Station. The platform looked completely ordinary. No disturbances, no hidden cameras, no strange equipment. Official logs showed no record of unauthorized boarding that night. Weeks later, I found myself instinctively scanning the sky near Elkridge whenever I passed through, searching for something I couldn't quite define. I was out camping alone near Lawson in Northern California during late September. The days were getting colder, but snow hadn't yet arrived. Breath visible in the night air, I'd taken time off work and skipped my usual coastal trip, seeking solitude instead. I found an old Forest Service site down a dirt road. Nothing official, just a small clearing big enough for my car and a two-person tent. Arriving around 4 in the afternoon while daylight remained, I set up camp, started a small fire, and cooked a simple dinner of instant rice and beans on my camp stove. Complete silence surrounded me. No other vehicles, no distant voices or music. Cell service disappeared the moment I turned off the highway. By 9 p.m., darkness had settled completely. No moonlight, no ambient glow from nearby towns. After sitting by the fire for a while, I crawled into my tent to read. My phone showed 9:42 p.m. in airplane mode. I read a few chapters of a mystery novel by lantern light, then shut everything down. I typically sleep lightly outdoors, but that night I must have fallen deeply asleep. Something woke me abruptly. The entire tent was illuminated. Not just a dim glow, but a bright white light, as if someone had switched on a powerful flood lamp directly overhead. What struck me most was the absolute silence. No engine sounds, no mechanical noises, just complete stillness. Sitting up quickly, I checked my phone. 2:08 a.m. Cautiously, I unzipped the tent and peeked outside. The light source was above me, not on the ground. Leaning out further, I saw something extraordinary. 5 or 6 small white lights rotating in a tight, precise circle about 40 or 50 feet above the tree line. They were evenly spaced, as if connected, yet no connecting structure was visible. I crouched in the tent's entrance, watching the lights rotate silently. My breath clouded in the cold air as my knees grew numb. The lights continued their steady, unchanging circular motion. Suddenly, they stopped. For about 2 seconds, they remained perfectly still. Then, without any fade or gradual dimming, they vanished. Darkness returned instantly. The forest road was quiet when I packed up at sunrise, skipping coffee and tossing the tent into my car. The entire drive out, I kept glancing at the rearview mirror, even though no one was behind me. About 40 minutes down the highway, I pulled into a small roadside diner just outside of town called Mineral. I'd passed this place before but never stopped. Inside it was tiny, just 2 booths and a counter with stools, an old linoleum floor. Only one other person was there when I walked in. A man sitting at the counter with his back turned. The waitress waved me in and told me to sit anywhere. I chose a booth by the window and ordered eggs and toast. When she disappeared into the kitchen, the man at the counter stood and turned around. He was tall, pale, wearing a sharp black suit that seemed out of place in this diner. No jacket, just perfectly pressed black pants and a button-up shirt, tucked in with sleeves razor straight. An old-fashioned wide-brimmed hat sat atop his head, dark gray or black. He didn't speak at first, just looked at me. Then he slid into my booth without asking, hands folded on the table like he'd been waiting for this moment. "Did you sleep through it?" he said, his voice calm and strange, as if mimicking conversation without quite understanding how. I stared, confused. "Excuse me?" He repeated the question slower, watching me intently. Something in my chest tightened, a feeling that my body understood something my mind didn't. I told him I didn't know what he meant. He tilted his head, then gazed out the window, seemingly bored or finished with our interaction. The waitress returned with my food, stopping short. "Everything all right here?" she asked. The night before flashed through my mind, the silent campsite, the tent, the endless waiting for a sound that never came. The last place I expected to see something strange was during a storm chase in western Kansas. I've been tracking storms solo for 8 seasons now, sometimes teaming up with other chasers out on the plains. This day was different. Late May, about 15 miles outside Scott City. Everything lined up perfectly. A textbook storm setup with dry line pushing east, massive shear, and cape values through the roof. The sky transformed from flat blue to something alive. By 5:40 p.m., the storm had become a classic supercell. I was parked on a dirt road with a wide horizon view, watching a cell build for an hour. My equipment was ready. Main camera on a tripod, GoPro suction mounted on the dash, running a time-lapse. At 6:12, the funnel dropped thin as a rope, quickly widening. It touched down in an open field, kicking up dirt immediately. I repositioned to stay ahead, capturing 3 full minutes of the tornado at its peak strength. During those minutes, something happened that I still can't explain. The tornado started wrapping in rain, but I could still see its base. Suddenly, a flash burst from inside, bright but not lightning. Later, at a roadside diner, something equally odd occurred. A man sat near me, silent and strange. He stood up and walked out without a word, leaving no trace. When I got home, my phone revealed an unexplained mystery. In the Notes app, a new entry appeared at 2:17 a.m., a string of numbers typed out like coordinates. When I was supposedly asleep in my sleeping bag, I haven't looked them up. Some things are better left unknown. I'd been tracking the tornado all day, my GoPro mounted to capture every detail. That's when I saw it. Something metallic inside the funnel, moving against the wind's rotation. Just a split second, a disc shape that seemed to fold into the cloud and vanish. Back at my hotel, a basic concrete block place off US 83 in Oakley with rusted HVAC units and a lobby that smells like freezer burn. I started reviewing the footage. When I tried transferring files to my laptop, something felt off. The GoPro clip wouldn't open. The file existed, but every attempt resulted in an unsupported format error I'd never encountered before. The main camera footage worked fine, so I isolated the clip with the strange flash and tornado, slowing it down and enhancing the contrast. What I saw was bizarre. The object had definite mass, You could see the wind bending slightly around it. In all my years of watching tornado footage, I'd never seen anything behave like this. I uploaded the clip to an external drive and unplugged everything for the night, deciding not to post anything online just yet. Around 1 a.m., a soft knock interrupted the silence. 2 precise taps, not urgent but patient. I peered through the peephole and saw 2 men in black suits, both with pale skin, completely motionless. One was taller, wearing a plain fedora-like hat. No luggage, no phones. I didn't open the door. After about 20 seconds, the tall one spoke through the door, his voice low and controlled. I was hiking alone near the southern edge of the Bitterroot Range early October, before the snow came in heavy. My name is Nate Shepard. I'm 38, live in Missoula, and I like to get out in the woods a few times a year to clear my head. The place I went isn't on a marked trail. It's one of those old Forest Service access roads that got decommissioned years ago, now mostly used by hunters and the occasional backwoods camper. I'd found it the year before while helping a friend scout elk routes. There was a path just faint enough to follow if you knew what you were looking for. That weekend was supposed to be a short, overnight solo. Hike in, set up camp, maybe catch some stars if the sky held clear. No cell service, no sounds except wind and birds. That kind of quiet always settles me. I've still got the rest of the tornado footage. Regular people see a tornado tear through a field, tear apart a fence, throw a grain bin, but I remember that half-second flash, that shape inside something it had no business being inside, and I remember those 2 men at my door asking for it like I'd stolen it from them. Are you prepared to surrender the storm data? Not your data or your footage. The storm data like it didn't belong to me. I didn't respond, just stood there, heart thudding in my ear. The shorter one shifted his weight slightly like he was about to speak but didn't. Then they both turned and walked away. I watched them through the peephole until they were out of view, then flipped off the lights and sat on the bed for a while trying to process it. I looked outside 10 minutes later. No sign of them. Parking lot was empty except for a pickup 2 doors down. No black car, no footprints on the walkway. Next morning, I checked my laptop. The file I'd exported was gone. Not deleted, just not there anymore. The folder I'd saved it in was empty, and when I searched for the file name, nothing came up. The drive hadn't been wiped, just that 1 clip missing. The external hard drive wouldn't mount. It spun up, then made a soft click and went silent, dead. I had backups at home on a desktop, but I didn't feel right until I got out of town. I skipped the next chase day and drove straight back to Lincoln. Weeks later, I tried again to pull the file from the memory card, and it was there. Just glitched all green frames and scrambled audio. Whatever had been clear before was now unreadable. I started hiking around 2 p.m., parking by mile marker 87 and heading up the slope. About 1.5 miles in, I spotted an unusual sign. It was a metal, dull, grey marker bolted crooked into a pine tree, reading "Restricted Zone" in block letters, no agency logo, no contact number. Strange, considering I'd been this way before and never seen a boundary marker. The sign looked old, with rust eating into its edges, and the bottom right corner bent as if someone had tried to tear it off. I paused, thinking it through. I wasn't doing anything illegal, just hiking, no fire, no hunting. And the sign seemed barely attached, with no fence or tape around it. Probably an old fire closure or logging claim, I figured, and continued on. A couple more miles in, I set up camp near a small bluff overlooking a dry creek bed. The sun had dropped behind the mountains, and the temperature plummeted quickly. I started a small fire, brewed some tea, and sat on a log with my headlamp off, watching the trees sway. That's when I saw the light, hovering about tree height, maybe 30 or 40 feet up and 100 yards into the forest. At first I thought it was a drone, but its movement was odd. It would pulse, dimming to nothing and then flaring up a few feet away, almost like blinking in and out of existence. The color wasn't sharp like a laser or tail light, but a softer, organic reddish glow that seemed to shift as if seen through water. Completely silent, no buzzing, no clicking. I stood up slowly, not wanting to draw attention, and extinguished the fire with some dirt. The light pulsed twice more, then vanished. I remained still, staring into the darkness, but it didn't return. Sleep came in fragments that night. Morning brought an early start back down the trail. Everything looked normal. No light, no sound, nothing out of place. But the woods felt different, hollow, as if the wind had stopped carrying sound and the forest had gone quiet. That's the only way I can describe it. I was flying a solo route from Gallup, New Mexico, late in the afternoon, early June. My job with a land survey company involved ferrying documents between regional offices, and this was meant to be a quick 90-minute trip to Chinle, Arizona. I was piloting a 1981 Piper Archer. About half a mile from where I'd parked on a hiking trail, near the tree line's edge, two men stood blocking the path. They weren't dressed for the outdoors. These were full black suits, immaculately clean, with no coats, hats, or bags. One was shorter, with grey hair and a sunken face. The other, taller and younger, but both wore the same unreadable expression. They weren't talking to each other, just standing side by side like they'd been waiting. I slowed down and gave a quick nod, thinking they might be from Fish and Game or some private land agency. But they didn't introduce themselves or ask about my presence. The shorter man looked directly at me and calmly stated, "This part of the forest doesn't exist." I laughed, thinking I'd misheard. He repeated it precisely. "This part of the forest doesn't exist." Unsure whether I was being threatened or tested, I responded, "Look, I didn't see any fence. I'm just hiking and heading back to my car." Neither man moved. The taller one finally spoke three chilling words, "You weren't here." I walked around them without making eye contact and quickened my pace. They didn't follow. When I reached the road, my truck was exactly where I'd left it, but the back tailgate was unlatched, which I never do. Nothing was missing, just shifted around. My cooler was upside down, and my sleeping bag hung halfway out the back. I hastily threw everything in, locked the doors, and drove the hour and a half back to Missoula without stopping. That night, I checked the GPS app I'd used to track my hike. The track stopped abruptly midway, with no elevation data or timestamps. Just a straight line ending in the middle of the woods. The next morning, the entire track had vanished completely. I haven't returned to that trail, or even come close since that day. The Four Corners region is mostly open airspace, offering miles of uninterrupted sky. My old plane, stored in a Gallup municipal hangar, handles the flight just fine. The day was hot and hazy, with light winds and minimal air traffic. It was a routine flight, just me, a thermos of coffee, and a radio that kept breaking up with static. About 40 minutes in, something strange happened. Passing over Shiprock, I caught a glimpse out the starboard window of something unusual. At first, I thought it was a bird or a sun reflection, but then I saw it clearly. Not a plane, but a matte black triangle floating silently. No visible engines, no markings. Just a solid geometric shape gliding effortlessly. It maintained perfect position, roughly 200 feet higher and a quarter mile off my wing. I checked my transponder and squawk. Everything appeared normal. I called out on the radio. Nothing but silence. The object held its position for maybe half a minute. No cockpit, no windows visible. Then it drifted closer, slowly enough to make me sweat. I turned 10 degrees south, tried to remain calm. Immediately it mirrored my movement exactly. No sound, no jet wash, just an eerily perfect, silent glide. Suddenly, it shot straight up and vanished in 2 seconds. No contrail, no pressure change, nothing. I scanned the sky but saw nothing. 20 seconds later, the radio crackled back to life with a standard weather update from Albuquerque Center. I responded, filed my position, and continued as if nothing had happened. Landing at Chinle's dirt strip, I was still unsettled. The dry, hot air smelled of creosote. I handed off the sealed envelope to the guy at the small shed they call an office. As I prepared to taxi back, I noticed him, a tall, lean man in a black suit and white shirt, no tie, holding a clipboard. No vehicle in sight. He walked directly toward me with purpose, as if he knew me. "Mister," he said. I simply responded, "That's my name." He stared at me through narrow sunglasses, his stance rigid and unwelcoming. No greeting, no handshake, just a blunt statement that stopped me cold. "Your route was misfiled. This airspace doesn't exist." His words hung in the air, challenging everything I thought I knew about my current location and flight path. Something about his demeanor told me this wasn't a routine conversation or a simple bureaucratic